The story is about two royal families in the empire. The first one was Shiwits, renowned as fearsome warlords, and the second was the Kleider, known for their wealth. If the power of these two families were combined, they would eclipse the imperial family itself. There was a time when these two families were close to each other, but 10 years ago, something happened. In the middle of the night, in a dark forest, the Duke and Duchess of House Clyde fell from a cliff and died. When the Duke Shiwits heard about the accident of his friend, he ran to the accident scene and only saw his friend's body and a child's small clothes. He searched for the boy in the northern side of his territory but was unable to find the child. Then 10 years passed since that incident. Duke Shiwits said to a child sleeping in front of him. The lady squeezed her hands. Now they have finally met. Duke Shiwits found the male lead, Damien. It was similar to the story. The lady sitting there was thinking that she kept her promise to find a family for him, and maybe they won't kick her out of the orphanage. According to the story, Damien will fight alongside Duke Shiwits. That will break out after 4 years from the adoption. And then Damien will meet the female lead and live happily. Duke Shiwits adopted the child sitting next to Damien. That girl was shocked to hear this. The man standing behind Duke Shiwits was shocked and asked if he can raise 2 women together or not. Then he said he may be not able to. He said she will become my daughter-in-law. But that's not how it's supposed to work out. The girl was shocked to hear this from Duke Shiwits. She only joined the orphanage because she didn't want to end up on the streets. The girl was getting shocks again and again. She couldn't believe that he wanted her to be his daughter-in-law. One man also in the orphanage was looking at the children. He said the kids were healthy as per his vision. The woman working there said the orphanage's first priority is to take care of their children. That man said he'll take one. At that time, the king had won so many wars, and they had so much money in their land. The noble people were eager to spend their wealth and to show people how generous and good they are. And that's when they started adopting people who lost their parents in the wars. But it turned out to be something else. A child was watching the maid. She was saying thanks to someone. The child said that she knew that maid just wanted to impress the nobles, or she doesn't even feed the kids and bathe them. To secure the orphanage donations, the orphanage directors only accept good-looking orphans. The maid found that girl alongside the road when she was there sitting and crying alone. Asked her where was her mother. She was one of them, the child's. But the maid forgot one crucial thing. Her mother was an infamous thief who caused trouble to the king. But her mother was caught while stealing and hanged to death. She was standing there alone when other kids were playing there. She thought no one would take the daughter of a thief. Kids were calling her to play with them. She came into the orphanage after being abandoned by her parents for the 3rd time. She carried one girl on her hands. Back in the past when her carriage was in an accident, she found something interesting. This world was a story from a book. She looked at that book. There where she was living everything could have been changed by a single flick of a wrist. In her past life, she worked as a scientist. Memories weren't that good inside her mind, but she remembers that she was so attached to the work she was doing there. That accident wasn't that bad. Accident triggered the memories inside her mind from the past. But still, something was bothering her. She has read so many books, but she only remembered what happens in this life with her. It was hard for her to remember the title of the book. She just stopped thinking about it because she knew what will happen in the future. They were sitting and she saw the director there and her expression. She understood by her expression that she lost the money in gambling. Director knows that it's a losing battle thing. Still, she goes there every time. She saw a new kid. She wasn't even scared or nervous at all. His clothes were dirty and she set him to say hello to everyone. She reminds everyone that he'll be joining everyone from then onwards. It was Damien. She recognized him immediately. She didn't forget about him even if she was living in a novel. Damien was the main lead, the one who will defeat the emperor. And that makes her the character that bullies him and gets kicked out of the orphanage. She was the villain in the novel. The male lead lived a miserable and woeful life. Damien's father was Duke Kleider, the head of the empire's foremost merchant guild. House Kleider was so influential that people said it was more essential to the empire than the imperial family itself. That led the emperor to grow envious, and he offered someone to kill House Kleider secretly. Duke Kleider's final testament revealed that the house and entire wealth go directly to his best friend, Erhard. After that, it didn't take long for the emperor, Duke Erhard, to attack the north so that he could be the target of much avarice. Did Duke Shiwits inherit the Kleider family's merchant guild? There were people who were close to Duke Kleider, but still, Duke Kleider left a will in the name of Duke Shiwits. There's nothing they can do. While Duke Shiwits was thinking, he needs to find the child as soon as possible. People had spread rumors that the child just looks like his father, with black hair and blue eyes. He knew that the child was alive even if the forest is a dangerous place to live. The girl in the orphanage knew that even if he was a slave in an earlier age, he would survive because he's the main lead. He was just standing in front of her. She knew he had been brutally beaten but didn't know it was this bad. She knew that she was the tallest, and there were people who were even taller than her, but he was even shorter than them. The director told everyone to tell him the rules of the orphanage. She went out. It was pin drop silent in the room. Someone walked towards him and said there are already so many kids, and she brought one more kid. Now everyone has to eat less because there's one more to feed. It was Carson. He was the oldest there. He said to Damien that if he needs to live there, he needs to do everything he says and should be able to obey him. He was not looking at Carson, and Carson got pissed. Few people started talking about how they don't like the look in his eyes and don't feel good about his clothes too. They started teasing him. She was thinking that those bullies will regret doing it. She was one of those bullies who bullied him and got out of the orphanage and then died alone after that. She was determined to stay alive no matter what happens. Carson asked Ellie if she wanted to join him to bully, but she refused. Carson asked what happened. She said that boy looks weak, that's all. She noticed that the boy was looking at her, and everyone was laughing at his weakness, saying he's good for nothing. Their eyes met. She remembered something about her mother, and as he's saying she's the dirty daughter of a thief mother. The director came, and she said it's time for preparing the dinner, and everyone agreed. A small girl calls out for Ellie as well, and she knew that Carson will start bullying him again. She was thinking that if she ignores everything and doesn't interfere, then she can avoid the ending anyway. She was cleaning the food and ignored it anyway. She knew he's the main character. He will do something about it. She was thinking what she'll do after leaving the orphanage. She was cooking. The main character will survive anyway even after being brutally beaten by people. She just couldn't able to forget the look he gave her and kept saying that there are people who lose their lives by poking their nose into other people's business. In the end, she did go there to help him out one last time. She took a long breath and banged the door. Carson came out and said she got him scared. He thought it's the director. She asked what they were doing there alone by themselves. They agreed to let her take a look. They were beating Damien. Carson said he will teach him a lesson. Carson kept saying that he thought this kid is a girl, but he's a guy, and what kind of guy has that pretty face? Over this, she said at least he has a better face than Carson. Carson got angry. She smiled and said she was kidding, and the director was actually looking for him. Carson got angry that what does the director need from him? Ellie says she asked her where he was, and she wouldn't wait much because they know her. Carson warned Damien and said he had a lucky day, pushed him back and then left the room. Ellie asked him whether it was good or not. His nose was bleeding, so he cleaned his nose with his dirty clothes. Ellie got angry and said not to do it. It will cause an infection to him. She gave him something she stole from the director's room. He looked away. She asked what happened. He said they'll beat him before the wounds even get healed, so it's better to leave him and not to bother him again. The more someone resists violence, it will rise again, but if one leaves it like this, violence will quell. He understood it at a young age, and she was stunned to see he was small, but he understood it. She gave it to him and said to use it anyway. She then quickly left there. She thought she understood Damien completely, but when she looked into his eyes, she realized they both were similar. She couldn't breathe as if there was something inside her lungs. She was just standing there in the hallway. It was supper time. The director asked everyone to silently have their supper without any chattering during dinner. Everyone was having their dinner, while Ellie was still concerned about Damien. She had a guess maybe Damien gonna skip the dinner. If he skipped the supper, he may be starving by tomorrow. Tommy said to Ellie that if she's not going to have that bread, she should give it to him. Ellie grabbed her bread and said this one belongs to her only. Tommy thought she isn't gonna eat that bread. Ellie told him she will gonna eat it sooner or later. She was saving it for Damien. She didn't know whether he will eat the bread or not. She came back to the same room where Damien was bullied by Carson. She wanted to give him that bread she saved. It was her work to help in the kitchen, but she left her work for Damien. She wanted to give him bread. The room was empty. She locked the door and thinking if he's not there then where could he be? He asked what she was doing there alone looking for a ghost or something. As soon as she was leaving, Carson arrived. She noticed it was Carson. She threw away his statement, saying she wasn't looking for a ghost or something, but she was actually looking for Betty there. Carson started again talking about Damien and making fun of him there. She understood he was talking about Damien. He said he heard the director through peeking, and he got to know that Damien was a slave before coming there. She was shocked. He kept saying how he hunted the monster in the dark by himself. Few kids didn't believe that a kid could kill a monster. Carson again started teasing Ellie. He said Ellie maybe have a crush on that kid or something. She slammed the door. She knew that Carson always used to tease kids, and especially to those kids where Ellie shows interest in. If only he was less irritating, and she could have understood his childish behavior. Ellie told them she's not really into him. Also tells them she might have seen him going to the warehouse. They wondered why the warehouse. Because only teachers were allowed to go there, then why would he be there inside? She said maybe it's because he was special. Carson got pissed. She said he was with the assistant teacher, and the warehouse has many delicious food in there. Because Damien's was really pretty. The orphanage always takes good care of them. She said he was gifted, maybe because of that they are treating him with special. Damien doesn't work because he's still a slave and has a master too. And Carson doesn't know about it. Carson told her he was stood there when they got roughened on him. She knew if she praises him, he likes it. And she asked if he was stronger than him. He was confident about that and said that everyone to follow him to the warehouse. They were trying to teach him another lesson. She called Carson and gave him the bread, and said to take it with him. Carson got shy, and his friends were teasing him. He then asked why but said thanks and left. She stood there. Late at night, the director came and said to light to be closed now. Ellie left the orphanage with a lamp. She was walking alone in the snow. She was thinking that maybe Carson and his friends have gotten caught by the director in the warehouse, and she gave him bread so that they came to be portrayed as thieves. She thought that the bread was at least got used, but she wanted to give it to Damien. She was wondering where he was. Damien was a slave before coming to the orphanage. She remembered something and thought he might have gone to haunt the monsters. In this story, the Duke Shuitz asked the question to the boy about if he ever took the swordsman training before. To that, Damien said in the dark, I had no choice but to learn how to fight. And that's how he survived there. When she was reading that book, she thought it was some hackneyed platitude which implied that pain and darkness are parts of the hero's journey. She kept walking and suddenly knelt down, said if he kept sitting there he would catch a cold. He was sitting on ice near the tree. She told him that Carson and his friends got into trouble with the director, so he doesn't have to worry about them anymore, and asked to come inside the orphanage. He thought and said they'll get free from trouble sooner or later. He felt safer sitting on ice rather than going inside the orphanage. She was wrong about Damien. His life wasn't the same as she thought it would be. He chose darkness over light. He always looked for himself, so that was maybe the reason how he learnt to use the sword. She said no one wants to live alone in the darkness, and they won't bother him anymore. They won't be there for any more days. She promised him as well that she will look after him if anyone tries to hurt him. She again asked him to come inside the orphanage age. He looked at her and remembered how earlier she helped him with the pain. But he didn't understand why does she want to help him anyway. And she said because she wants to. Because she really wants to help him out anyway. It was true, she genuinely wanted to help him out. She didn't know whether he would understand her or not, but she can't let herself die like the original story. She told him to come with her as she was worried about him and couldn't eat because of that. She said she'll give him dinner. He agreed to walk with her. They were walking together, holding hands. Damien was able to avoid the fight that alone managed to change her destiny. They came back to the orphanage. She told him to be very quiet. The director and the teacher must have gone to the casino, but they need to be very quiet. He nodded to her. She asked him to take off his clothes as they were dirty, and he can't get to bathe with dirty clothes on. He hesitated. She told him that the director's bathwater is nice and warm, and he was cold as ice. If he doesn't get warm water soon, someone has to cut off his fingers and legs if he gets frostbite. He started rubbing both of his hands together. She told him that won't work. She asked if he doesn't want her to stay there then, and he said his body is repulsive. She understood that as a slave he must have gotten scars from his master. He said if she sees his body she would get back or scared of him. She grabbed his hands and let him know that he's not repulsive and there should be no guilt he should have within himself, neither he should be ashamed of himself anymore. He was too stunned to say anything. She said him to follow her inside and wash himself quickly as she didn't know when the director will be back. She assured that he can wash alone himself even with the injury. She sent him inside and told him she has left few clothes outside the door and bathe himself with warm water. She went to find something in the warehouse. He saw warm water coming into the bathtub. He got into the bathtub and washed himself. He was enjoying the bath, and Ellie came there directly without knocking on the door. She asked if he was done bathing himself. He wore the clothes she gave him, and he nodded yes to her. She noticed that clothes were big, but they were the smallest clothes she ever found. He looked cute in those clothes, so she let him have those clothes for himself. She found a few sandwiches in the warehouse while he was bathing himself. He poked into the sandwiches. She wondered if he never eaten anything like this before. He never ate something like that. She made that weird face. She got angry. She didn't understand what did they actually feed to their slaves and how Damien was actually even raised. She gave him one sandwich and helped him how to eat the sandwich. He was looking at her silently. He started eating as well. He ate all the sandwiches. He liked it, and she was pleased to see. She saw his hairs were still dripping water. She understood he is just a kid. She helped him to clean his hairs and dry them so he does not catch cold. He leaned toward her, and she understood that he's believing in her a bit a lot. While drying his hairs, she noticed some scars on his necks. He was beaten by an animal. She asked how did he get those scars. He told her that he already had those scars when he was picked up, and his master told him to grow his hairs so nobody sees his scar. She understood why the book mentioned about his hairs were long because of his scar. She was pissed to understand that the world was cruel towards him as a child even in the imagination book. She noticed that his frontal hairs were so long and asked him if it bothers him or not. She understood that her bangs were long as well and things won't be the same from now on. She looked at him. He was looking handsome. She understood his beauty isn't good for her. He was so much prettier than expected. He got flushed when he noticed she was looking at him. She got worried. She thought he might have caught a fever and checked his temperature by putting her hand on his head. She asked if he had caught a fever or not. He said he's fine but he feels hot for no reason. She was happy to hear that he has not caught a cold. She took him to the bedroom where everyone used to sleep. She opened the door. Everyone else was sleeping. Tommy woke up by the door sound. He asked who was behind her. She told him to be quiet or Betty will wake up. She also told him she's all alone and no one is with her. He went back to sleep. She found an empty bed. She understood that Carson and his friends were not there. She has to be careful even though they were not there. She showed him his bed and hers as well. She told him one is closer to the door and hers is near the window. She told him they are supposed to sleep separately. It was his first night so she agreed to share the bed with him. He got confused hearing this. She asked him to come faster and pats on the bed. He hesitated. He just slept there. She understood that it was his first time in the bed. She pulled up the blanket over him and she smelled something. She understood that she's been into the director's bathroom but she never smelled something like this before. She noticed she was acting like a creep and started patting Damien, and said to him to sleep. She asked him if he's not going to say goodnight to her. He said sleep tightly Ellie. She was happy to hear this. He turned to the other side. They both slept. He peeked through the blanket and saw her fast asleep. He didn't understand how unusual person she was. He remembered how she told Carson he's just weak. He thought maybe she's just guilty for what she has done to him. Most persons keep their distance from slaves but she was different. He remembered how she was there for him throughout the day. He was thinking that he might not be repulsive. He remembered how her eyes sparkled when she said earlier. Those eyes were pretty. He won't believe he said to himself. He slept and in his dream, he was fighting a monster holding a sword. How the monster used to roar and his master told him to entertain them as slaves work at this. He can die even of fighting their master. Won't care about that too. How they used to bet money on that boy and can't afford him losing any battle. No one ever came to save him. He was determined that he will die if he didn't kill this monster. He gathered all his courage and he was determined to kill that monster. Ellie woke him up upon his dream. He woke up with terror on his face. She was worried about that to see. She asked him whether he had a nightmare or caught a cold. She checked his temperature and was relieved to know he didn't have any fever but he was sweating heavily. She asked him if he was okay or not. He had a blurry image towards her. She looked at him. He looked sick enough. He looked at her. No one was ever concerned about him as Ellie was. She was kind to him. She then went to find some washcloth for him. He grabbed her skirt. He was fine, he said. He doesn't feel sick or anything. She set him to rest again. Pats on his head. It was strange for him. He noticed whenever he was with Ellie he felt warm and tingly, as if she holds the sunshine within inside her. Or he should have told her that he was sick. And then he heard a bang on the door. It was Carson. He was angry at Ellie. He asked Ellie if she did on purpose. Ellie was a bit sad too. Carson was yelling at Ellie. He was angry because if the director had found him there, they could have done something worse to him. He told her that she knew he was not in the warehouse. He blamed Damien. She asked why he was blaming Damien. He was shocked to the core hearing this from her side. She said he was a fool for falling for that idea. She looked at the clock. He asked her how she could do it to him and grabbed her shoulders, yelling at her what she was actually planning to do with him. The director saw and said Carson hadn't learned his lessons yet. Carson tried to explain the situation. He tried to explain how Ellie called him an idiot and she was the one who started it. He asked the other kids as well if they had heard it too. The director lady came forward to him and said not to be ridiculous, kid, because he was always the first to raise his hands on the other kids, and that was the reason no noble was interested in him. He told her it was Ellie's fault they snuck into the warehouse. The director asked Ellie about this. She told her that Damien was really sick yesterday so she went there to get some medicine for him. But Carson told her all the teachers had gone to the casino. Carson was shocked to hear this from Ellie. She made a crying face and said she would never believe that teachers would leave them and have fun in the casino. He hesitated, and she took one more step towards him to ensure that she wouldn't ask him any more questions. She said she noticed something strange. She asked whether the door of the warehouse was left open by any chance. Yesterday the director sent her on an errand, so she was the last person to lock it. Ellie was worried if someone saw them there. The teacher confirmed that no one was there other than them. The teacher got chilled there. Ellie apologized again, saying she was sorry and careless about everything. She said she would go with Carson to the director and explain everything. The teacher shouted no because of her secret. The teacher again pointed at Carson, asking why he had lied to Ellie about the teachers. Something bad could have happened because of him. Carson said he never said such things to anyone. He said Ellie was lying. Ellie stood there crying. The teacher grabbed him and took him outside the bedroom area. Carson kept yelling it wasn't him. They both left the bedroom area. It was silent for a moment. She thought Carson wouldn't bother Damien, at least for now. She turned and asked Betty and Tommy with a smile that they should leave before the director scolds them. Betty ran and hugged Ellie and asked when she would come. Ellie patted her head and told her that she'll be joining her soon. Betty asked her to come faster. Damien said Ellie, the teacher, must have left the orphanage last night. Ellie told him that she would do anything to protect him from others. She wanted to pay them for what they've done to him. He wondered why she wants to protect him anyway. He said that grown-ups should be the ones to protect and care for children. Probably Damien hadn't met any grown-up who takes care of children and protects them. She said there would be someone who would take care of him. He will be able to trust them. He asked if he does trust them, then what he should do. He will live happily after that, she said. Tommy ran into the bedroom and said to Ellie that the director had awoken and she should go downstairs. She was frightened and took Damien's hand, running towards the downstairs, saying if she saw them there sitting and dilly-dallying, she would scold them both. He looked at her, and he didn't understand what that feeling was about. Carson was so angry. He said Damien would pay for it. He was stuck in that room because of Damien. He didn't understand why Ellie took his side. He didn't understand why she was sticking up for him like he was her little brother or something. Carson was getting more and more pissed off. But Ellie's affection wouldn't last so long. It would be all Carson's again sooner. Something was cooking up. She tasted the soup and it was all good to have it. She asked Damien if he could stir the soup with the ladle. He didn't say anything, rather, he just nodded to her. She noticed that he hadn't said anything since the morning, maybe because of the lie she told the teacher. She also understood that he had faced so many problems until now as well. Maybe it's because he's not used to telling lies, so maybe he's a bit vexed. She didn't understand anything. She asked if he was thinking about what happened earlier that morning. He didn't understand. So she directly said he was thinking about the lie she told the teacher. He said that he wasn't really thinking about that and said not to worry too much about it. If he was thinking of getting revenge, then he should do it properly. She said she might have lied, but that's much better than being used by someone. Regardless of what life was until now, he can't let people take advantage of him anymore, she said. She smiled and asked for assurance from him. He looked at her and was thinking he was never told something like this before, and he only survived by obeying Master's orders. He promised himself that he would never let anyone use him ever again, and he would protect her just like she had protected him earlier, no matter what it takes him to do it. The director woke up with a headache. She was thinking that she didn't even drink that much yesterday at the casino, and she needed to sober up. She still had a headache and somehow managed to come into the kitchen. She saw Damien working there and wondered why he was there. Only if she hadn't lost that game or if she had fewer drinks. She had made a deal with a guy who told her that her debts would be cleared if she took care of Damien until he returns. She told everyone that Damien was going to live with them. But the truth was that his master would be back sooner and he's just a slave. If his master found out that Damien was working there, he wouldn't be pleased to see this. The teacher scolded Carson, saying that he should be in the room rather than being there. He didn't do anything he should not be held, Carson shouted. The director asked Melina what was going on there. Melina told the director about how Damien was behaving and that he stole a loaf of bread from the warehouse. Carson said he didn't steal anything but rather someone gave it to him. She said he should not say anything more, and this wasn't the first time he was caught stealing something. The director had a headache, so she told Melina to take care of Carson, and that another lesson needed to be taught. Melina grabbed Carson's hand. He was determined that he wouldn't go down like this. Carson blamed Damien as well, saying that he came with him but got away with it. Ellie came forward in support of Damien, saying he didn't go there last night. She said he was sick, so she stayed with him all night. Carson said why does she always lie and she was the one who told him to go to the warehouse. Ellie told the director that Carson is bullying other students. The director didn't understand anything. The director looked directly at Ellie. She was furious. She remembered the day when Ellie was brought there. Ellie asked her why she had to go back to the orphanage again. She said it's because of her sleazy mother. She was just tired of picking her up again and again. She has returned to the orphanage so many times. She never made any disturbance, but she was defending Damien. She found something was fishy about her concern towards Damien. As the director was looking at Ellie and Damien, Carson yelled out that he was telling the truth. She needed to believe Carson that he didn't steal the loaf of bread. The director already had a hangover, so she got more pissed because of Damien. She told Melina to handle Carson and not let the new kid work around there. Then, handling herself, the director left from there. Ellie told Damien to wait in the dining area. Damien asked about whether she would come with him or not, but she had to stay there to work. He held her dress. She patted him and told him that they were almost finished and would be joining him there soon. The reason why the director didn't tell him to work with the other kids was because of his master. His master wouldn't like his working there, but that thing would definitely bother the other kids. She said he would wait for her. Damien didn't let her dress go away. The teacher called him again to follow her and took both of them to the dining area. Tommy asked whether they both were going to get punished or not because the teacher's hits really hurt a lot. They must be scared, Betty said. She was glad that the kids didn't know what was going on there. The director didn't want anyone to know as well. She determined that she would look for Damien after she finished there. Everyone was playing in the dining area, but Damien was sitting in a corner. He hated being alone, but he also didn't want to lose Ellie. She came and asked him if he had waited for her or not and asked him to breakfast together. Her work was done. He wanted to sit next to Ellie, and she told him that they made something delicious for everyone that day. Tommy came and said he'd sit next to Ellie. Damien looked confused. Tommy was in a better mood, so he didn't care about Carson anymore. So, Ellie asked him to sit somewhere else as Damien was new there. But Tommy didn't want to sit somewhere else. Ellie told him if he shared his things with others, then he would get famous easily. Tommy agreed to share his seat with Damien because he wanted to get famous. She knew Tommy was just still a kid. She gave the seat to Damien. Damien looked at Tommy and felt he was a nice kid. Suddenly, someone started crying. Betty was crying because her doll was dropped into the soup. Ellie rushed towards Betty. She hugged Betty and comforted her somehow. She told Betty they would clean the part. She would clean her doll for her as well. It was silent there. Damien was sitting all by himself alone. Tommy introduced himself, as Damien and Ellie were close, so he thought maybe they could spend time together. Damien didn't say anything. Tommy thought he was maybe shy and said they could play together as three. He heard friend got excited. Tommy told him Ellie and him are best friends. Damien looked at him with scary eyes. Tommy got freaked out. Then, after Ellie came and asked if Damien was enjoying the meal or not, he nodded yes towards her. He started eating faster than before he was eating. Tommy was shocked to see. Ellie asked if something was wrong. Damien gave him a scary look again, so he just said nothing happened there. Tommy was scared. He thought Damien was just a nice little guy, but he was another beast in a small body. During the night, she took him again to the bathing room and asked whether he was done washing or not. He came out of the shower. She noticed his cheeks were soft, more like squishy, but she must not poke his cheeks, not when he's about to open up. She wiped his face. She noticed that his hairs usually came in the way. She should offer to cut those hairs, but if any nobleman would see him, they would take him away. She cannot let that happen. Duke Shiwitz has to adopt him anyway. Then they went to the bedroom. She said he can sleep on his bed from now on. He was a bit worried about sleeping all by himself. She said he has to sleep all by himself. He didn't want to, maybe. She looked at him and thought he might want to say something. He turned around, climbed on his bed, and slept there. Many things had happened that day. She thought he's tired maybe. She went to sleep as well. She said good night to Damien. He replied as well, and she was stunned to see that. That was the first time Damien has said her name. She was so happy that Damien was saying her name. Ellie woke up in the middle of the night. She wanted to go to the toilet. She saw Damien's bed. He wasn't there. She thought, where did he go? Betty was awake as well. Betty told her Carson took him. Ellie got scared. Carson took him out of the orphanage. He was beating Damien and saying because of him he had to suffer a lot. Damien was bleeding. Carson's friends were laughing as well. He won't be spared even if Ellie is on his side. Carson said he means nothing to her. He looked at Carson and Carson teased him again for looking at him. Said what does Damien gonna do about it? He remembered how Ellie told him not to let people take advantage of him. Damien was in a rage. Carson again said that Ellie is good for nothing weaklings like Damien. As he was about to hit Carson, Carson said he's just like other guys whom she takes care of. It wasn't like he was special or something. He had heard many cruel words. Nothing has ever bothered him. Every time someone has said something he used physical violence, but this time when Carson said he's nothing to Ellie, He felt like he's going deeper and deeper into the water, like ashes in the wind. As Carson was about to hit him with his legs, he called him slave and said he should know his place. Carson was teasing him, saying he's just a slave and nothing more. They are not equals. Carson then threw him into the water. As he was about to fall into the water, Ellie came and rescued him. Everyone was shocked to see her there. Ellie, with fearless eyes, asked them what they were doing to Damien. She was running heavily. She wanted to catch them as soon as possible. Carson usually threw kids into the lake he doesn't like. And it was winter there, that lake must be freezing. Damien was in danger. She looked at him with fearless eyes. She was so angry at Carson. Carson was chilled as he looked at her. She asked what they were planning to do with him. Carson didn't understand why she was doing this to him. He remembered how she refused to bully that kid earlier. He didn't understand why she was saving Damien. What makes him so special? She took him to the shelter. There was a reason why Carson didn't like Damien for a reason. Carson, out of anger, tried to punch Damien again. It was all his fault. Everything was going wrong. Ellie grabbed Damien and dodged Carson's punch. Carson was about to get dropped into the lake. Carson got dropped into the water. His friends were trying to help. Damien and Ellie were aside from there. Ellie told Carson that he went too far this time and also what a horrible person he is. She simply walked away with Damien out of there. As they were walking, he realized it was the first time he saw her angry. He didn't understand why she was mad at him. Because he was too weak, or perhaps it's all just a dream. Damien took his hands back. She looked at him and asked why didn't he fight back with Carson? Why didn't he resist them? He realized that she was mad because of him. She asked if they made fun of him, and he asked if that is the reason why she was always helping him throughout the time. If that was the reason why she was helping him, then she should have let him be himself, because he has already faced something like this before. She understood everything and told him that she does not think he's weak. She was also feeling sorry for not apologizing earlier for calling him weak. She told him that she does not think he's weak or something. She told him that he's stronger than anyone there in the orphanage. But that's not really what he wanted to hear from her. He knew that she helped him because she felt about him. He started crying there. She was shocked to see him crying, thought she might have said something wrong to him. He told her that he thought he was annoying to her, and he didn't know why and how. He was rubbing his eyes strongly, wiping his tears. She told him not to do so. She pampered him, saying his beautiful face will get swollen. He asked whether she hates him or not, but she said she does not hate him. And he was talking about the time she avoided eye contact with him. He told her about something was bad in her heart. He was talking about the time when he took a bath. She told him that she avoided contact because of another reason. He started crying again. She promised him she won't do it again. She was relieved that he stopped crying. He told her that he will hold her hands and will eat together with her. She agreed with this, but also made him sure if someone tries to hurt him, he will defend himself. Don't let other people pull him down no matter what happens. He promised her as well. She told him to get back into the orphanage and treat his injuries. As they were walking together back, he realized that Ellie showed him the truth and the true happiness. He remembered the times when she was with him in all the situations. He felt so much joy when he was crying. He knew this was happiness they were talking about. And that's the reason he became himself a little bit greedy. A man said please spare him. It was Duke Shuitz who was killing people. He said the information he got was wrong. It was all a waste of time for him. He walked away from there in an attitude. He told his servant to follow him to the next region. They came back to the orphanage. Ellie was patting him and told him to get some sleep. Damien held her dress and asked her if they could sleep together. He said he was still having scary nightmares and wanted to sleep together. Ellie told him their beds were not big enough for two people. He looked at her with big eyes, about to cry upon hearing this news. Ellie thought it wasn't such a difficult request, so she let him sleep on her bed by the window. Damien was happy to sleep there with her, and Ellie was glad to see him happy. She felt like they were siblings. Damien removed her hands, saying he's not her little brother. She reminded him that he's just 11 and she's 13. He looked sad. She thought he was mad and shouldn't be treated like a kid. She assured him she was just kidding and that sleeping beside him felt nice and warmer. This made him feel a bit better. Then she told him to sleep, and they both fell asleep. In the morning, Ellie made a flower crown for herself and Damien. She told Damien that he looked pretty. He thanked Ellie for making him happy again. Ellie was concerned and asked him if he was feeling sick. He coughed and said he's fine. She told him not to lie and to tell her when he actually started feeling sick. He said he hadn't been feeling well since last night. Ellie asked Tommy to check his temperature, and Tommy told her that he had a high fever and should stay in bed for at least a day. She told him to stay in bed as Tommy advised. He asked about Ellie. She told him she needed to work, or the director would yell at her for no reason. He worried that Ellie would leave him again. She reassured him not to worry, she'll be back quickly and make soup for him. He asked her to be there as soon as possible. She left him with Tommy, who didn't know what to do. He was stunned and thought this kid was wily. As Ellie was working, she noticed that the director was still there and had no plans to leave. To get the medicine, the director had to leave, but she was in a bad mood. The director got angry and told Ellie to clean faster. She cleaned everything quickly and went out. The director was worried about the orphanage's finances. They had many kids, and their finances were very low. She thought maybe she should sell the Mana Stone. Mana Stones are rare and can be used for magic. It was hard for her to get these stones, and she didn't want to sell them. She looked at Ellie. She thought if Ellie wasn't the daughter of a thief, she would have sold her to pay off her debts. The teacher came inside and told the director that Duke Shuitz and the nobles wanted to adopt the children. He was visiting people who had adopted children. He asked some people if they had adopted a kid with black hair, but they said he didn't have blue eyes. The director asked Melina if she had spread rumors about the late Duke Clyder's child being in the orphanage. Melina was concerned about the lie. He asked the director what they would do if it turned out to be a lie, considering it was Duke Shuitz after all. She told him not to speak such words. Duke Shuitz had never seen the child in person, so he wouldn't know the difference between fake and real. She told him to do as she said, and Melina agreed. Ellie heard all of this from outside. She thought Duke Shuitz was finally there to pick him up. Duke Shuitz exclaimed, "How pathetic." He was angry with some people and stated that he couldn't be deceived by the herbs they brought to him. Those people asked for forgiveness from Duke Shuitz, claiming they didn't know it was him and begged for mercy. The man standing beside Duke Shuitz suggested that he should at least listen to them, as he hadn't come there to kill them. Duke Shuitz retorted that they had committed a sinful crime and he wouldn't forgive them. He demanded to know where the child was if they valued their lives. They were stunned to learn that the child belonged to the late Duke Clyder. They informed him that the child was at the orphanage, explaining that their friend ran it and she had left him there due to his age, as it would be difficult for a child of his age to be with them. Duke Shuitz raised his sword, ready to strike, but the man beside him intervened, addressing Duke Shuitz as Your Grace, and informed him that they might not be entirely lying. He mentioned receiving a letter a few days ago stating that the child Duke Shuitz was searching for was at Saint Orphanage. Duke Shuitz was surprised to hear this news belatedly, having searched every orphanage in the kingdom without success. The man explained that the orphanage used the name to secure funding and make a profit. He intended to inform Duke Shuitz after confirming the news. Duke Shuitz was furious but refrained from immediate action upon the man's apology. He decided to deal with them later, punishing them for their deceit, and sent a letter to the orphanage, announcing his visit. As he departed, he resolved to deal with those people first, swiftly killing them both. In the orphanage, the teachers were worried about dealing with the sick child. The director was furious, questioning how they could expect to recover after soaking in the lake. Concerned about Duke Shuitz's imminent arrival, she decided to give the children cheap medicine to present them to him, planning to sell her Mana Stone to afford it. However, upon opening the cupboard, she discovered the Mana Stone was missing. Ellie was worried about Damien's fever and applied wet towels to his head. She informed him that the face cloth she had given him was warm now and went to soak it in cold water. Damien pleaded with her not to leave him alone, but Ellie insisted his fever was too high. She remained until he fell asleep and then sneaked out, taking the Mana Stone with her to alleviate his condition. She was also concerned about Carson but prioritized Damien's weakness. She found Damien adorable and decided to get something for him but was caught by the director as she was leaving. The director accused her of stealing and lying, likening her to her mother. Ellie protested, asking what her mother had to do with it. The director accused her of repaying her kindness with theft and slapped her. Damien intervened, standing in front of Ellie, and warned the director not to touch her, threatening to make her pay if she did. The director was shocked to see the angry look on his face. She asked why he had to poke his nose into her matter. She remembered how her masters had told the director that this child was very angry about everything and he could get dangerous as well. As she was scolding both of them, Melina came and called the director. She told her that they had received a letter and he would be there shortly. She was shocked to hear this. She ordered Melina to dress the children in nice clothes with black hair and blue eyes. She told them both that she would deal with them later. As the director was leaving, Ellie asked about Damien from her. The director asked, "What about him?" Ellie told her that he had black hair and blue eyes too. The director told her that she couldn't show him to Duke Shuitz in that condition, as it would be a total disgrace to him. Damien fainted there, and Ellie rushed towards him. The director told her that a child as sick as him needs rest more than anything. She told her good luck with nursing him and walked away. He was calling for Ellie, and she said it would be all fine. She told him that she would make sure he gets reunited with his family. Duke Shuitz arrived, and the teachers there greeted him. He was thinking that the orphanage was far from the city and needed a horse and carriage to get there, which was good for children. He asked, "Where is the director? She should have responded to my letter by then." Melina told Duke Shiwitz that they received their letter just before his arrival and they were late to tell the director about that. The director asked about the child. They didn't say anything about the child, as the director hadn't said to say anything. Duke Shiwitz thought what a mess it was. He said he would find that child himself. Duke Shiwitz was saying that the place was so cold and it's not good for young children. The man walking next to Duke Shiwitz said he was thinking the same as well. He told the man to kill all the people there if they lied about Duke Kleider's child being there. Ellie got directly into Duke Shiwitz. She fell down. Duke Shiwitz asked her if she could stand and asked for an apology from her. Duke Shiwitz noticed her bright green eyes. She told him it was hard to stand up. She asked Duke Shiwitz who he was. The man standing next to Duke Shiwitz was shocked to see that she didn't know who he was. She asked them directly if they were there to adopt a child. They said yes, and she was joyful. She said the children were in the director's room. The director was checking kids with black hair and blue eyes. All 5 of them were there. Duke Shiwitz said, "He was hiding from us." The man said that she must be playing something at us. He didn't know what she was hiding, but he got into the mood of killing people. He said thanks to Ellie, and Ellie bowed to him. Duke Shiwitz said they should be getting going as well. The man thought what a child faced Duke Shiwitz without crying. But he remembered how there was one more child who had faced Duke Shiwitz without crying. But it was long ago. The director welcomed him, and the kids were hiding behind the director. Duke Shiwitz asked if they were the children she had. And she said they were the children with blue eyes and black hair he was looking for. All the children started crying suddenly. She didn't know what to do because all the children started crying suddenly. He had a stone with the mana of Duke Kleider's son. The stone would glow if the sun was nearby there. The director asked him what happened to her. Duke Shiwitz said she was lying about the kids and ordered Auntie to kill her. The director was shocked to hear this and didn't understand. The director asked for an apology from Duke Shiwitz. She said the child he was looking for was among these 4. He wanted a child with black hair and blue eyes, and all of them were there. He said one is missing. Duke Shiwitz took his sword and put that sword just behind her ears. He asked her where that one child was. He said to her that if she lied to him, she would die here. She was sitting near the bed, holding Damien's hands. She heard voices coming from other rooms. She knew that Duke Shiwitz was coming into that room. Even though all she wanted was about to become true, she was sad after all. But it was the best for Damien. She held his hands and said, "It won't be this hard from now on." Damien awoke and asked Ellie what she meant. Duke Shiwitz was walking towards the room. She said she promised him. She promised him to reunite him with his family members. As she was speaking to Damien, Duke Shiwitz slammed the door open. Damien said, "Him a family." He didn't understand anything. Duke Shiwitz looked at them. Duke Shiwitz was standing there, and the teachers were shaking their legs behind him in fear. Auntie was shocked to see Duke Shiwitz was acting emotional. He hadn't seen him emotional ever since his wife passed away. He thought he would never see him again in such a manner. He had heard that that young boy was quite screwy. Duke Shiwitz looked at her, and she looked at him straight as well. He recognized her as the girl who earlier got bumped into him. Damien saw this and stood directly in front of Ellie to protect her. Ellie said Damien should not stand there. Damien, with angry eyes, said, "Don't you dare look at Ellie like that." He didn't care who was standing there. He would make Duke Shiwitz pay if he hurt Ellie. Duke Shiwitz teased him, saying he can't even stand straight and he wants to protect that girl. Duke Shiwitz looked at that mana stone. It was bright as the sun. Duke Shiwitz recognized that it was Duke Kleider's son. Damien fell down to the ground. Ellie took him into her hands. She was worried about him. Duke Shiwitz said not to worry about the kid. He would be fine. He has only reabsorbed the mana that was taken away from him. Ellie checked and noticed that the fever was down from Damien's body. Duke Shiwitz said he has found the child. Duke Shiwitz asked the teachers if they could tell him why the kid looks so unhealthy. He kept saying if he found some unsatisfactory reason, he would cut everyone's head, but for now, he ordered them to gather the adoption papers and to call the director. Ellie was wondering that Duke Shiwitz was exactly like how he was defined in the book. A man domineering beyond compare and able to intimidate those around him with ease. Auntie said that Duke Shiwitz was more frightening than a phantom and he should be calmer. He said that all the teachers ran away. Auntie thought by the look of Duke Shiwitz, Damien felt down because he got scared. He kept saying that he had a personality that people would definitely get scared of him and young Lord would be thrilled at the prospect of adoption. Auntie asked if the child was sleeping, but he saw that Duke Shiwitz carried the kid into his hands and said they can't leave a kid on the floor. He also ordered Auntie to fetch some face cloth for him. Ellie asked him to let her handle the rest from there. Duke Shuitz looked at her and said she acted in such a way that she knew he was looking for this child, but this was the first time he had been there. She got freed because she didn't understand how he got to know. She knew he was testing her, and she needs to answer it carefully. She knew if she messed up, she would end up like the story Ellie on the streets. So she told the truth. She said that she heard from the director. She told Ellie that to tell him the kids with the black hairs were there, and he understood that's the reason she points out that there were 5 children. She knew he was suspecting him, and if he found out something, then things could go worse. So she said she figured out that Damien could be the child Duke Shuitz was looking for. After all, he had blue eyes and black hairs. He again asked why didn't she let him see Damien at the very first. She told him that she wanted him to look closely at the children so he can understand how things are there. Auntie brought the face cloth. She kept telling how teachers don't take care of them and they've hurt themselves while working there. And teachers leave them at night alone to go to the casino and gamble and have fun. She was hoping that he could see the situation there, how bad it was. He noticed something about her. He asked for her name, and she replied Ellie. He also asked for Damien's name. By then, the director came inside and said that she heard he was looking for her. Director thought Ellie must have told something to Duke Shuitz, and she'll pay for it. Duke Shuitz said he will adopt the child. The director was shocked. Also, he said the young girl he would adopt her too. She was sitting next to Damien. He said he would adopt Ellie too. She was stunned. Auntie asked him if he was adopting her as well, but Duke Shuitz said she'd be his daughter-in-law. She was shocked to hear it. She was thinking that a young girl would be his wife, the lead character. She looked at Damien. Damien was asleep, saying, "Ellie, don't leave him." She was thinking it hadn't been that long, but she was attached to Damien. She was also happy that they wouldn't be apart from there. The director said he couldn't take her with him. She yelled and said he didn't have any idea who and what the girl is. She knew if Duke Shuitz adopted her, it was finished for her. She had to stop him from adopting her. She said her mother was a thief and she's the daughter of a criminal. Ellie was angry at the director. A thief. When the war was going on, she was able to get inside the palace and steal the emperor's most precious treasure. The emperor had searched for the thief, but he didn't find her. And one day, they were able to capture her. Auntie heard about that story and she was hanged on sight. He wondered that she had a daughter. The director begged Duke Shuitz to reconsider her adoption, and taking such a child into his home would destroy his reputation. Duke Shuitz, with anger, said enough. He said he couldn't take her nonsense and ordered Auntie to take her away from there. Duke Shuitz kneeled to Ellie and said he would let her decide whether she wanted to come with him or not. They both looked at each other. She said she had only one condition, to dismiss all the teachers that work there. Director yelled at her, calling her a brat and saying she was talking nonsense to Duke Shuitz. Auntie was shocked to see that someone had proposed their thoughts to Duke Shuitz. He wondered if that child was something else. She kept saying that even if they left with him, other children there would suffer, and these teachers needed to be punished for how they've been treating them. She also asked Duke Shuitz to help turn that orphanage into something good. And this way, the other children wouldn't have to suffer a lot and wouldn't be treated like products. Duke Shuitz agreed to her conditions. He stood up and called Auntie. Director kept saying that the girl was more cunning than she looks. Even though Auntie dragged her out of there, she was still cursing her. It was quiet for a moment. Ellie had no idea that Duke Shuitz would agree so easily. Duke Shuitz said the orphanage would be different from now on as she wanted. And he again asked her if she would come with him. She was thinking, what was his aim? Why does he want to take her with him? She didn't know what that person was, but it was good that things turned out positively. She thought to be on Damien's side until he meets the female lead and falls in love with her, and she agreed to come with him. Duke Shuitz ordered Auntie to remove all the teachers and director, and people of Shuitz will run the orphanage until a new director gets appointed there. He also said he would see that this place gets enough teachers to handle students. Ellie came and bowed to Duke Shuitz and said thanks to him. She looked back at the orphanage. She was relieved that her friends would be able to live a happy life there. She was happy, and Duke Shuitz noticed something odd about her. He thought she was the Emperor's spy, but she first offered her own condition before immediately coming with him. And on top of that, she was genuinely happy to see some changes in the orphanage. He was thinking about his wife, how she was willing to solve his problem but offered him to marry her. Betty came running and hugged Ellie. She was crying because she would never see Ellie after she left, as she had not seen any other kids who have left the orphanage. She said she would pay some visits to the orphanage sometimes, and they were asking if she promised them to be there for them. Duke Shuitz took out his cigar and lighter. He said don't bother glaring at him like that. His looks can't kill him. It was Damien. Duke Shuitz said he would be more threatening with a sword. Damien asked him why he adopted him and why he took Ellie as well. What was he trying to do? Damien asked Duke Shuitz. Damien looked at Duke Schuetz. Duke Schuetz said to Damien that he would look forward to his training after they returned to the duchy. Damien asked Duke Schuetz why he wanted to take him and Ellie with him. Duke Schuetz didn't say anything and just looked at him. He said he's not taking Damien with him, he is just returning him to the place where he belongs. He said Damien would understand it soon enough. He will understand everything. But for that time, he was just a feral animal. However, if he returned to the right place where Damien belonged, he might be able to see the world from a different perspective and save people with his power and strength. At the very least, he will be able to protect the people he seeks. Damien punched the tree. He was thinking that adults are scarier and harder to trust than children. He didn't want to go with Duke Schuetz. He was thinking that Duke Schuetz might be like one of his masters, and if he became like one of his masters, then Ellie might be in danger because he was too weak to protect her. Damien remembered something earlier about Ellie's words. She said to Damien that he has to return to the place where he always belonged, and Damien asked her whether she'd come with him or not, and she said she'd be there whenever he needed her. Damien punched the tree again and said not to force Ellie to work for him. He can't force her to work. Upon that, Duke Schuetz asked why he would make a small child work for him. Damien doesn't have to put these thoughts in his head, Duke Schuetz said. Damien said he'd make him pay if he ever forced her to work. He turned around and kept walking. Duke Schuetz said he's just like his father. He doesn't need a mana stone to prove his identity. Duke Schuetz said Duke Kleider was so soft and affectionate to his wife, but as he brought himself toward other people, his presence changed immediately. Damien's every action showed that he was the blood of Duke Kleider through and through. The carriage started running through the deep woods. Ellie was in bed. She woke up and said, "When did I fall asleep suddenly?" Damien was there as well with her and slept on her shoulder. She was glad to see Damien feeling better. A crow passed by the carriage, and Ellie got spooked. She looked at the crow and started thinking that they were on the battlefield, but this scene was even worse than she could have imagined. She thought it was true that this territory was crawling with monsters. She suddenly put on a brave face, but as she did, a crow came and started hitting the carriage glass. She got spooked and looked away, thinking maybe that crow understood whatever she said because that crow was definitely looking at her. But again, that's not possible. They arrived at the mansion. They got out of the carriage and looked at the mansion. It was big and fabulous. Damien was still asleep. Crows were flying there, and it bothered her as well. As they were standing at the gate, Damien asked what happened to Ellie, and she just brushed off the conversation. Someone greeted Duke Schuetz for coming back home. The man said they received a letter that he would be back with Lord Damien. Everyone there bowed to Duke Schuetz as they were walking. Duke Schuetz said he forgot to mention one more detail in the message, that he brought one more child with him, who was going to be his daughter-in-law. The servant didn't understand. He looked directly at Auntie, begging for an explanation through his eyes. Auntie said that's how it turned out. The servant said Sir Auntie should have stopped his grace. Ellie held her dress tightly. She knew they would not welcome her with open arms. She remembered that when she was younger, her new family members treated her badly and called her the daughter of a thief. She was younger at that time, so she was excited to meet a new family every time. But she thought she was just another fool. But this time she wasn't like her younger self. She was all prepared for the people's words and whether they would accept her or not, and she was confident that she would be able to dodge all the arguments they might have about her. The servant said that they don't have a young maid to serve the young lady. His Grace should have mentioned the words in advance. Ellie didn't understand why she needed a maid. Ellie said to them that she would be fine on her own. She did not want to make a fuss. She didn't need anyone's help. Back at the orphanage, she did all the work on her own. She did not want them to think that she was just another annoying kid. The servant said not to worry about her ways, and he would look into the matter. France looked at Ellie. As they were standing, a young lady whispered something in Auntie's ears. Auntie said to Duke Schuetz that the vassals and distant relatives were waiting for him. He asked if the rumors had spread this much when he was absent, and Auntie said maybe they had spread. Duke Schuetz said that this might cause many people to come to meet Damien. Duke Schuetz said to tell them that he would meet them after he got some rest. He ordered France to show the children their rooms. France took them to show their rooms. Ellie was thinking that vassals and distant relatives might be a threat to Damien. She was thinking the Duke might have adopted Damien, but it would take more time to show his power. This meant Damien's journey had just begun. She flinched and said she would not let anyone be a threat to Damien. A man slammed his hand on the table and yelled that he found the child. But there was no way the child could be alive until now. Another man spoke up that his Grace had seen him with his own eyes. The man said this could be some kind of trick. Such a thing could be possible with a small field mana stone. Maybe an illusion. House Kleider's vassals and distant relatives were waiting for their chance to take control of the merchant guild. On top of that, Duke Schuetz had already taken custody of Damien. The man said, did they even have any idea that for no less than 11 years they had been running the merchant guild? It was them, members of House Shiwitz. They didn't want one person to run the merchant guild, and they didn't want things to go back to how they were just because Duke Shiwitz brought some brat out of nowhere. The man stood up and said they had to do something about it. Another man said they agreed with him, but nobody had the courage to go against Duke Shiwitz. If they could have changed his mind, they would have done it already. The man was so pissed that they might lose control and have nothing to say to protect their seats. The door opened, and Duke Shiwitz came inside, asking what was going on, saying his ears were hurting in the hallway. The men greeted Duke Shiwitz, and they sat down. Duke Shiwitz said he suspected they might be running their mouths, so he intentionally came to visit them. He looked at everyone and said frankly that he had found Duke Kleider's son. The man sitting next to his grace said this was a moment for celebration and also asked the name of the child. Duke Shiwitz said it's Damien. It's a noble name. Well, in that case, he has all the rights to be head of House Kleider. Duke Shiwitz understood that they were trying to convince him to put Damien against them. He knew that if the small kid ever thought about carrying the Kleider family name, these people wouldn't hesitate to tear him to shreds. The same could be said for Kleider family relatives and vassals too. Duke Shiwitz tapped his first finger on the bench and said that Damien has a very bright friend with him, and she looked like she could be useful to the family, so he brought her along with him. He would personally instruct them so they may be his official successors. The man sitting next to Duke Shiwitz was shocked and asked what he was thinking. Duke Shiwitz said he would spare nothing to ensure that those children are able to carry on the Kleider name on their shoulders. The men started raising questions, saying his statements were ridiculous and why would they do such a thing. But then he said to silence and announced that he would adopt Damien and the girl, and they both would stay under his care. He would also ensure that when the time comes, they both get married to each other. All the men were shocked at the thought of the marriage of that kid. Duke Shiwitz knew that it was irrespective of age to be recognized as an official member of the family when someone completed their betrothal rites. That meant if Damien got married to the girl Duke Shiwitz selected, he would be more powerful than the Kleider Merchant Guild. He knew that once they found out that Damien was alive, they would probably try to cast him out or have their daughter marry him. But Duke Shiwitz wouldn't let that happen. Duke Shiwitz said he was asking for their blessings because they had all sworn their loyalty and lives to his family. He made sure that everyone agreed with the decision he took there. Everyone was so silent and stood there. A man was angered that he didn't know Duke Shiwitz would do nothing but rather go beyond imagination in selecting a wife for Damien. He had to make a new plan. Ellie was surprised to see her room. It was glorious. That room had everything: a bed, a mirror, and a large space. She was so shocked to see it was her room. She couldn't imagine it and wanted to pinch herself to check if it was real. She called for Damien. He was not there, but a few ladies were standing behind Ellie. They said the butler took Lord Damien for a bath. She didn't understand. The lady said they would be serving her from then on. The woman introduced herself as Royana and said she would do everything in her power to ensure her comfort during her time there. The women bowed to Ellie, and Ellie also bowed back to the women with greetings. The women said she did not need to be formal with them. She wondered if that was okay because she had never given any orders to any adult, and they were very polite with her, and she was not used to it. Maid Royana smiled and said she would get used to it. Royana then introduced her mates to Ellie one by one. She also said to feel free to call them whatever she wanted if she did not remember their names. It wasn't hard for her to remember their names, and she called their names and thanked everyone for everything. The maids were so shocked to see such a kind kid there. She was thinking that maybe they had misunderstood her as noble like Damien, and that's the reason they were acting like this. Royana said to Ellie to follow her, and she would help her take a bath. Ellie was a bit shocked to hear that Royana would help her take a bath. She took her to the steam room and did her hair. She didn't want to go with them, but she didn't have any choice. She never wanted them to see her malnourished body. She determined herself to get used to it so they wouldn't think less of her. A maid standing behind Ellie smiled. Royana asked her what happened. Ashley said Miss Ellie was so adorable. That's the reason she was smiling. Another maid asked her whether she used any scented oil before taking a bath. She didn't know what those were and said warm water would be enough. The water in the orphanage was so cold. She didn't understand why everyone was looking at her and thought maybe she shouldn't be so honest about everything. Royana said she would do her best to find an oil that she would like. Ellie thanked them and said she wouldn't bother them much, but Royana rephrased the sentence, saying they would try to serve her until she got comfortable with bothering them. Ellie didn't understand what she meant by that. Royana just smiled at her. It was night. Ellie was on her bed thinking about how the three maids helped her take a bath. She was thinking about the hot water and scented oil they used for her. She felt so refreshed and never wanted to leave that place. She rolled over on the bed and bumped into Damien. She asked him what happened. He said nothing happened. He sat there in front of her and said he was taken aback for a moment. Ellie noticed Damien's cute haircut. She understood that he must be feeling self-conscious because of his short hair. He noticed that Ellie was looking even prettier than earlier when he saw her. His heart was beating faster than before. She asked if the butler said anything to him that day. He asked, like what? She leaned to him and whispered in his ear that she heard in the future they have to get married. He didn't understand what marriage was. She told him that getting married means loving the same person for the rest of their life. He again asked what is love. Even she didn't know how to explain love to a kid, so she started explaining to him how her mother told her about love. That when one falls in love, it tingles inside, and one feels like they have a fever all over their body. Their heart pounds fast. He started blushing and thought maybe he loves Ellie. She was still thinking about how to explain this to him. Damien suddenly started hiccuping. She rushed to him and asked what was wrong. She told him he could stop hiccups if he pinched his nose. She understood that he was in shock because he just learned that they were going to get married to each other. She didn't know that helping him find a family would place her in a position where she would become part of it. She didn't want people to think that she planned all this because of his money and all. Ellie pinched his cheeks and asked if he was going to hiccup again. He didn't understand why she asked. She said his face was all red and it seemed he was about to explode. She was thinking maybe one day everyone would find out that she was the daughter of a thief and asked him if he felt tired or something. Even though Duke Schwitz brought her there, he said he was just feeling hot. She said she should move a bit then if he felt hot. He told her not to leave him, and she replied that he was feeling hot. He still wanted her to stay there. She looked at him and asked if he was worried about the nightmare he was going to have again. He said yes. This place was all new to him, so he was kind of scared of it. According to the book, he should be able to adjust himself, but reality was disappointing. He slept there. She hugged him and said it's fine for him even if it's hot. This way, he won't be scared. He hugged her back. She found Damien even cuter this time. They slept there and she told him to sleep tightly. A lot had happened to them. Their life was hard, but from there apart, Damien's life would be easy. She hoped that from tomorrow he might see some glorious dreams. The man asked if he got any news that he should tell him. The informer said he had some news. He told the nobleman that the young girl Duke Schwitz brought himself was the daughter of an infamous thief. The informer said the nobleman knew her name as well. She was the one who made off with the emperor's treasure. He was thinking that a boy out of nowhere and a daughter of a thief wasn't right. The nobleman threw a bag of money towards the informer. The nobleman said that the informer was, as always, quick and fast. The informer left, and the nobleman was thinking to tell this information to the emperor as soon as possible. He understood that Duke Schwitz might already know about it. If the emperor learned this truth, the whole wealth of both families would go out of their hands to the imperial family. He thought and came up with a plan to take Ellie out of the palace. In the morning, Ellie was yawning. Rihanna asked her whether she was still feeling sleepy. Ellie said she was just a little bit sleepy. Rihanna told her to hold up because she was going to meet elders and vassals today. Meanwhile, the other maids were choosing a dress for her. They made Ellie ready. She thought she would feel cuter after wearing the dress. Meanwhile, the maids were admiring her. Rihanna told her that Lord Damien would be late, and if she liked, she could wait in her room. She agreed to wait for him. She was exhausted waiting there, and she heard the maids talking about her cuteness. She was tired of waiting for him and thinking when he would get done with his outfit. Someone knocked on the door. Rihanna went and asked what happened. A maid said Viscount Carbonneau wanted to meet Ellie. She thought maybe he just wanted to get to know her better before they met formally. Rihanna said that Ellie wasn't ready to meet anyone yet. Viscount Carbonneau came directly inside and was standing just in front of Ellie. He said she looked perfect to him. Viscount asked her if he came at a bad time. Ellie looked into his eyes and understood that he wasn't there for greetings but for something else. She answered that she had just finished when he arrived with a huge smile on her face. The Viscount said his timing was perfect as always. He also said he brought something special for Ellie. The maid took the case and opened it there. It was the Blue Hope crystal, which is only available in their territory. He wanted to catch her stealing something so that he could take her out of the palace. Viscount said, with the Blue Hope crystal, she would be able to perform magic. He brought it especially for her. He smiled and asked Rihanna to leave them alone as he had some private matters to discuss with Ellie. Rihanna hesitated at first, but then Viscount assured her that he wouldn't put Ellie into any kind of trouble. Rihanna looked at Ellie and she nodded to Rihanna. Rihanna left them alone in the room. Ellie looked at the gemstone and thought that it was the same color as Damien's eyes. The Viscount told her to stop looking at the crystal, as it was not something she deserved to see. She didn't like the way he talked to her. Viscount said he was a generous man and would let Ellie look at it as much as she wanted and return it to his maid once she was done. He then walked outside, telling her to meet him sooner. She was stunned and chilled there, not understanding what just happened. The maid said that it was true. Lord Viscount took the Mana stone with her in mind and asked if she wanted to look at it again. By that time, Rihanna came inside and said Damien had arrived and they should get going now. Ellie stood up and walked away from there. The maid holding the stone was shocked that Ellie didn't even look at it. She remembered that the Viscount told her to slip the Mana stone into Ellie's pocket before she left, and she wouldn't even notice. Rihanna asked Ellie about the talk and if the Viscount did something. Ellie replied that he didn't do anything. The Viscount's maid took the stone into her hand and determined to slip the stone into Ellie's pocket. The maid said she was going as well. She looked at Ellie and thought she needed to do it now. She intentionally fell towards Ellie, and without being noticed by anyone, she slipped the stone into her pocket. Rihanna asked Ellie if she was okay. The maid fell down, but Ellie was not hurt as she stepped aside when the maid was falling. Rihanna was worried if she got hurt or something. Rihanna said she would teach a lesson to the maid who fell towards her. The maid was thinking about whether they noticed her doing that or not. Rihanna said the maid was waiting for her outside and she should leave now. But Ellie noticed something. She grabbed the maid's hand and said she fell down and her clothes looked a little dirty. The maid looked at Ellie and said she was fine. Ellie then left for the meeting. Ellie greeted everyone with a bow. Everyone noticed and started talking about how she didn't even have a family name. They never thought Damien's wife would be a commoner. They didn't understand why Duke Schewitz brought her. Ellie smiled, knowing everyone would talk about her, but it was a little less than what she expected. Damien was angry that they were taunting Ellie. Duke Schewitz tapped on his shoulder and told him to calm down until he returned to his place. Damien calmed down. Ellie asked Damien why he didn't look good. Damien said it was nothing. Viscount called Duke Schewitz. He said he wanted to show him something. Duke Schewitz said it should be important because he opened the topic there in public. He should have arranged a meeting to show him whatever he wanted. Viscount said it was about the blue crystal he mentioned earlier. He polished it and wanted to show it to Duke Schewitz. Duke Schewitz agreed to see the crystal. Viscount asked his maid to present the crystal to Duke Schewitz. The maid said she needed to inform him about something. She whispered into his ear, and the Viscount was shocked. Duke Schewitz asked what happened. Viscount said the blue crystal he wanted to give Duke Schewitz was actually missing. Everyone started mumbling. Someone asked who had it last, and the maid said she held it last before it disappeared. The Viscount got angry and asked how she could be so careless and who held it last before she touched it. She said the last time she showed it to Ellie, she didn't return it to her. She explained when he went there to meet her and showed the crystal. Viscount said he was sorry to say this to Duke Schewitz, but he had heard something disturbing. He said everyone had heard the story of a thief who broke into Count Lachenal's manor. He said Miss Ellie is the daughter of that thief. He said they could not ignore this. Duke Schewitz understood his tricks. He knew that he was about to bring something up as he mentioned the blue crystal. Viscount asked if Duke Schewitz would allow him to search the girl for the crystal. Ellie was shocked to hear this. The Viscount asked Duke Schewitz for permission to search Ellie for the stone. Ellie couldn't believe what she had just heard. He asked again for Duke Schewitz's permission. Ellie accepted that her mother was a thief, but she herself had never stolen anything. The Viscount, speaking harshly, said he merely wanted to check. Ellie agreed but insisted that if he didn't find anything, he had to apologize to her. The Viscount acknowledged her boldness and accepted her terms. He asked Duke Schewitz for permission once more, but Duke Schewitz noted that Ellie had already given her consent. The Viscount's maid began searching Ellie's pockets directly but was shocked to find nothing. The Viscount, thinking she had found it, was also shocked. He shouted at the maid, accusing her of not checking carefully enough, then pushed her aside to search Ellie's dress himself. He, too, found nothing. The onlookers began whispering that Ellie might not have stolen the crystal after all. The Viscount, pale and certain he would find the crystal, grew enraged. He grabbed Ellie, pushing her back and forth, demanding to know where she had hidden it. Damien rushed to protect Ellie. Duke Schewitz grabbed the Viscount's hand, declaring that he would not allow this ridiculous scene to continue. Ellie was surprised to see Duke Schewitz come to her defense. Duke Schewitz accused the Viscount of wretched tricks and asked if he thought Duke Schewitz was a fool. The Viscount claimed he was acting out of concern, but Duke Schewitz was not convinced. He called for Auntie. When Auntie arrived, Duke Schewitz instructed him to search the Viscount. The Viscount protested, confident that nothing would be found, but Auntie discovered the blue crystal in the Viscount's pocket. The Viscount was shocked, claiming he had no idea how the crystal got there. Ellie knew that the blue crystal was lightweight. She had managed to swap the crystal by distracting the maid when she fell, removing it from her pocket without being noticed. When the Viscount was near Ellie, she had silently slipped it into his pocket, knowing the thick northern clothing would conceal it. Duke Schewitz demanded that the Viscount pay the price for his deception. The Viscount was terrified. Duke Shiwitz ordered Auntie to take the Viscount and his maid away. The Viscount pleaded for mercy, but the door shut behind him. Ellie felt sad about the Viscount's fate, even though he had been deceitful. It was hard for her to watch someone end up like that, but she knew she had protected Damien and herself. Someone mentioned the condition they had discussed. Ellie said she remembered. Duke Shiwitz pointed to his ears and told the Viscount to apologize to Ellie for doubting her. Everyone stood there in guilt, then knelt and asked Ellie for forgiveness. Duke Shiwitz said that under normal circumstances, he would have punished them immediately. But since Auntie was busy, he would revisit the matter after the meeting. Everyone admired his generosity. Duke Shiwitz told everyone to sit down, including Ellie and Damien. They began discussing Damien and Ellie's marriage. Someone pointed out that it was forbidden for a noble to marry a commoner. Duke Shiwitz acknowledged this and said it was the purpose of the meeting. He proposed finding a family to adopt Ellie as their daughter. Ellie was delighted to hear this, but everyone was shocked. Duke Shiwitz asked who would adopt Ellie. Ellie smiled, wondering who would adopt the daughter of a thief. Duke Shiwitz asked who would adopt Ellie as their daughter. If no one chose Ellie, then Duke Shiwitz asked Ellie to choose a parent for herself. She was shocked. Duke Shiwitz explained that she would carry the family's name, so it was up to her which family she wanted to accept. She turned pale. Ellie began thinking that if she joined a noble family, they might not treat her well and could taunt her. Their children might not accept a commoner either. She sat down, sad and lonely. A voice called for her. She looked up and saw her mother. Her mother reassured her that wherever she went, she would be loved. Her mother reminded her that since the day she was born, she had been the most beloved daughter. These thoughts made her sad. She had once hated her mother for giving her a dishonorable life, but she realized that her mother was the only person who had truly loved her. She doubted that anyone would willingly accept her as their daughter, thinking she would be treated more like a guest in their home. She began looking around for someone. At that moment, a maid disrupted the meeting, saying she had an urgent message for Baron Amanta. Duke Shiwitz asked what the message was. The maid explained that the Baroness was suddenly ill. Baron Amanta apologized to Duke Shiwitz and asked to be excused. People began murmuring about the Baroness's condition. As soon as the Baron heard about it, he ran out. Ellie remembered hearing the name Amanta before. Someone mentioned the Baron's efforts to develop his mind, but another noted his hands were tied. Ellie then recalled Baron Amanta as a nobleman who owned a small mine. She remembered that Damien would one day use a sword made from minerals found in that mine to win future battles. She also thought about the importance of wealth. Ellie told Duke Shiwitz that she wanted to be with Baron Amanta. Duke Shiwitz said he wouldn't stop her if that was what she wanted, but she would need to persuade the Baron as well. He added that she wouldn't be able to use tricks on Baron Amanta. She didn't understand what he meant by that. Duke Shiwitz explained that while Viscount Carbonneau might be tricked by her, Baron Amanta definitely would not. She hesitated, realizing that he knew she had slipped the crystal into the Viscount's coat. She didn't understand why he hadn't mentioned it before, but she knew he had helped her meet Damien. She wondered what he stood to gain from saving her. Duke Shiwitz asked again if she could do it. She realized that he was the only one who understood her worth. She said she would do it and show what she was capable of. He nodded. Damien and Ellie changed into something good and pretty and went out. She asked how she looked, and Damien said it was beautiful. They entered a room full of beautiful flowers. Ivana told Ellie that at the end of the corridor, a room connected to the flowers. She was happy to see that Damien liked being there. Ever since Auntie took the Viscount away, they hadn't heard anything about him. Damien was relieved too. Damien started running after a flower. Ellie found it cute, thinking that Damien might not have chased a flower before. Damien caught the flower and called Ellie over excitedly. He told her that the color of the flowers matched her hair. She smiled and suggested they find a flower that matched Damien's hair color. She pointed at a flower and said she found one that matched his eyes. They were happy together, and Ellie was glad to see Damien happy as well. She then told him that sooner or later she was going to be adopted by someone else. Damien didn't understand and asked, "Adopted again?" She explained that she would only take the surname of Amanta but would visit him every day and continue to stay with him. She promised this to him. He smiled, and Ellie liked his smile. She asked Damien if he wanted to share anything with her. He told her about his sword training and how the real training would begin the next day. Ellie told him that maybe this was their last day to play and asked if they could play hide and seek for the rest of the day. Damien didn't know what hide and seek was, so she explained that one person hides while the other looks for them. Damien imagined this and agreed to play. She described the rules and everything. By evening, they were worn out from playing. Both were heavily tired. She told him to let her go as the game was finished. Suddenly, they heard a voice. They looked around but didn't see anyone. Ellie was scared. She didn't understand where the voice came from since it was just the two of them. A big dark figure appeared out of nowhere. Ellie and Damien got scared. Ellie hugged and squeezed Damien tightly. Nothing happened as they both closed their eyes. Ellie opened her eyes and looked at the figure. It was a woman sitting on the ground with a horrified face. She was shivering and scared. Her face was pale. The woman asked Ellie where she was. She was feeling cold. Ellie noticed that she wasn't from Duke Schuitz's household. Ellie asked her if she was okay and helped her to her feet. Ellie noticed that her clothes were fancy and decided that she must not be a worker. She suggested taking her to the greenhouse first. Ellie noticed something. The lady's hands were as cold as ice. She knew if the woman stayed outside, something bad could happen to her. The lady was already in shock, and Ellie knew if she forced her to come with her, she would get more scared. She needed to be as kind as possible to avoid frightening her further. With a big smile on her face, Ellie introduced herself and told her she was taking a walk with her friend Damien. She asked the lady's name as well. The lady was so stunned she could barely speak. Ellie understood that the woman was in trauma and perhaps didn't remember anything. She knew that people who suffer from trauma often have memory problems, similar to dementia, and that anxiety could worsen the condition. There was no cure for it. Ellie held her hand and asked why her hands were so cold. She gave her a scarf and said there was a place full of flowers where it was much warmer. She invited her to join them. The lady asked with curiosity if that was true. Ellie replied yes, and Damien nodded in agreement. Ellie asked Damien to support the woman to get her back on her feet. The woman smiled. The three of them went inside the garden. The woman was feeling warm again. Ellie asked why she was outside in the cold and if she was lost. The lady replied that she didn't know why she was outside. Ellie said it was fine to forget things, it happens to her too. Ellie asked for her name, but the woman couldn't remember. Ellie said she couldn't call her madam all the time, so she needed a name. The woman kept thinking. From behind, someone said Vieira. Ellie looked back and recognized the voice. It was a man who said the lady had no idea how they had been searching for her and what she was doing there. The lady looked back and said Marvin and mentioned she must have lost her way. Ellie didn't understand anything at first, but the man was Baron Amanta. Baron Amanta told the lady it wasn't safe for her there and asked her to come to him. Ellie realized they were married and that the woman was Baroness Amanta. Baron Amanta said he had told her to stay with the maid. She apologized, and he said to go home with him. Baron Amanta then addressed Ellie, saying he might not know her intentions, but she should not use his wife's suffering for her gain again. Ellie didn't understand why he said that. He might have thought Ellie got close to Baroness Amanta for her own benefit. Damien defended Ellie, saying Baron Amanta shouldn't talk trash about her. Baron Amanta said Lord Damien misunderstood him. Damien insisted there was no misunderstanding and that Baron Amanta shouldn't insult Ellie, as she was kinder than he knew. Ellie was shocked to see Damien speaking like this to one of the great knights. Due to his old age, Baron Amanta didn't use his sword as much as before, but he would be Damien's master one day to teach him swordsmanship. Ellie intervened, telling Damien to calm down as it didn't bother her. Baron Amanta taunted Ellie again, saying she truly had some tricks and understood why his grace took her under his wings. But her tricks wouldn't work on him. He added that he had no intention of taking Ellie as his daughter, and warned her to stay away from his wife. He then walked away with his wife. Ellie was shocked to her core. She knew Baron Amanta wouldn't like her, but she didn't expect him to hate her this much. She realized that not only was she in Baron Amanta's bad books, but Damien was as well. Ellie told Damien that he shouldn't be so defensive with everyone. He asked why not, reminding her that she had told him to defend himself and fight back. She clarified that he should only get mad and fight back when someone did that to him. Damien said he got mad because Baron Amanta insulted her and asked if that was wrong. Ellie stood there, looking at him. She noticed that before, Damien wasn't able to detect anger and sadness. He might have opened up to Ellie but still couldn't express his own feelings well. Yet he got angry and fought back against Baron Amanta. She couldn't take back what she said. She looked at him, patted his shoulder, and said she was proud of him. She understood that Damien had started sharing his feelings and had taken another step forward in his life. He smiled. She knew that Damien still had issues with other people and couldn't get along with them easily, but he was kind and nice. Once she explained all kinds of feelings to him, he would get along with others as well. She told him that even if he got mad, when she said to stop, he needed to stop. He asked, even if she was in danger. She said danger wouldn't happen to her, she would escape before it happened. He understood her. Someone called for them, Lord Damien and Miss Ellie. It was Ivana, running towards them. Ellie thought that the Baron family had already refused to adopt her. Ivana said they didn't see Baron Amanta there, did they? Ellie said they ran into him. He was with his wife. Ivana told them that if they came across the wife of Baron Amanta, they needed to avoid her. Ellie asked why. Ivana said the Baroness had an illness that made her forget her memories and behave like a child. Ellie may not know what the Baroness would do to them. Ellie understood that this wasn't about her adoption. She asked why she was unwell. Ivana told them that they both had a son, named Sir Jarrett. The Baroness fell ill after the birth of that child. She asked if there was something they could do to treat her illness. Ivana replied she didn't know and advised her to leave it be and alert a servant if she saw the Baroness. Ellie was still confused. She thought that her condition wasn't so bad even after suffering from that illness. She even recognized Baron Amanta after she saw him. Neglecting her may be difficult to control, but leaving her alone isn't the answer, Ellie thought. At night, in Baron Amanta's house, he said to his wife that he entrusted her and she disappeared like this. She was sad, sitting there. He said he knew that she wasn't herself at that moment. He was sad and at a total loss. The woman and Baron Amanta were happy when they learned that his wife was pregnant. They had waited a long time for such a miracle. Vieira's health took a different turn after the birth of their baby. She got into some kind of illness that even doctors couldn't treat. Her memories frequently went missing. One day he got angry with her, unable to hold on anymore. He found her that day sleeping on a cliff. He suspected that the reason for Vieira's memory loss was that she wanted to forget everything. Baron Amanta was the one who always wanted a child. He blamed himself for putting a burden on her shoulders after the birth of their child. She always enjoyed her freedom. While he was talking to himself, Vieira said to Marvin that the child saved her today. Baron Amanta asked which child. Vieira said he saw her too. He remembered the blonde girl. Vieira told him that she warmed her and gave her a scarf. After that, she took her to the warm greenhouse place. Vieira smiled and said she's a little angel. She was still shaking outside. If Ellie hadn't found her there, she would have frozen. Baron Amanta noticed that Vieira smiled, and it was such a long time since he saw Vieira smiling. Vieira asked Marvin to go with her to visit the children to apologize to them. She said the child was her savior. She asked if he was willing to do it for her. He looked at her. Vieira was still smiling. He thought the child might be trying to trick them because she needed their name. But after seeing Vieira smile, he felt guilty for taunting Ellie. He was silent. He nodded that he would do that for her. Ellie said, "Damien, how did he?" She touched his skin and said his skin is so nice and soft. She told him that his skin is like cotton candy, and she will make him one cotton candy, so soft and fluffy. Damien said Ellie may have softer skin, but Ellie said he has the softer skin. Damien touched Ellie's cheeks. Damien was surprised. He was in shock. Ellie asked what happened to him. By that time, a maid came and called for both of them. She said Baron Amanta and Baroness Amanta were there to see both of them. Ellie was surprised to hear this. Baron Amanta said he owed her an apology and bowed to her. Ellie was shocked again. Baron Amanta said he misunderstood what happened between them. He was there to apologize to her. Ellie didn't understand what to say. She thought he was there to have a fight, but she was shocked now. She was thinking maybe he didn't realize his full potential or mine until much later. She didn't understand why he did that. He asked his wife if she wanted rest, but she was okay. Meanwhile, Ellie understood that he was so worried about his wife that he was not able to focus on something else. That means she has created an environment that makes Baron Amanta focus on his work, and that will eventually help Damien to fight with a sword faster. Ellie asked Baron Amanta to accept his apology. He agreed to her. She said that people who suffer from neglect become more easily confused, and raising your voice makes them even more scared. And that's why he should not lash out at his wife. He was shocked to hear this from her. Ellie said to Baroness Amanta that she wanted to walk with her. Baroness Amanta didn't understand why she asked her. Baron Amanta asked if that's all she wanted. Ellie said yes, she wanted to go for frequent walks with Baroness Amanta. As she hadn't been there for a long time, she hadn't made any friends besides Damien, and he would be training from that day, so she wanted to be friends with Baroness Amanta. Damien said he could make time for her. She said to Baroness Amanta that she wouldn't bother her too much, but to accompany her 3 times a week. Baroness said she would be a burden to her. She asked Baron Amanta to spend more time with Baroness Amanta. Baron Amanta agreed to this. She said they could go together to the greenhouse as well. There they could watch flowers together, and she wanted to show Baroness Amanta as well, Ellie said. Baroness Amanta was happy. She knelt down and agreed to go out with her. She said she's looking forward to it. They were talking, and Ellie told her how she ended up there in Grace Castle. Baroness Amanta said it was not easy to decide to come north. Ellie was familiar with adults talking politely with her. She said there were a few things that made her scared, but it was still better than the orphanage. It was 100 times or maybe 1,000,000 times better than the orphanage. Baroness Amanta said she might have been through a lot. She held her hand and said it must have been hard for Ellie. Ellie was sad as someone understood her and told her that it was not that bad too, as the other children of the orphanage were sweet. Sometimes they were not, and teachers were definitely not good. But His Grace took care of them. Baroness Amanta was laughing that His Grace never really took matters into his hands in such kind. But he did. Ellie said he saved Damien by bringing him from the orphanage to the castle. Baroness Amanta said it might be because of his guilt. Baroness Amanta didn't know whether it was good or not to tell her, but there wasn't anyone else who could explain this as good as her. She said she should tell her, as her memories are available now. She said that about 15 years ago, the Empire got into a major war. It was due to a prophecy the great temple graphs received. A mystical power would bring glory to the Empire again. The mystical power is from the life force flowing through the trees. And with that, they understand that nature is the source of magic. And with that, each tree is born with mana, and that is more powerful too. In fact, the people living in the jungle near trees can use different magics. But the world tree suddenly vanished. Even after giving so much effort, they were not able to regrow trees, which led to a number of rumors. Rumors were that the tribe living in the tree world was hiding its true powers, even though they were the ones who had saved it. And the noble families declared war against the tree world people. Both Duke Shiwitz and Duke Kleider fought in the war together. Both of them became best friends. They won the battle, and people praised both the dukes. They were waiting for Duke Shiwitz's arrival, but he wasn't alone. He was there, but with a lady, Yuria. Ellie thought who was Yuria. There was nothing in the book named Yuria. Yuria belonged to one of the tribes. Ellie was surprised that someone from the tribe became a duchess. While Baroness Amanta said people started calling the Duke Shiwitz family as the devil's progeny. For generations, the members of the family suffered from madness. They suffered from an ancient curse, and people also started calling His Grace's lands cursed lands. Ellie was thinking that the book was all about Damien, and she never read something that Baroness Amanta told her. Whereas Baroness Amanta told her that the reason why His Grace fought the war was to relieve the madness. But ever since Yuria arrived, his madness was gone. Ellie asked what does that mean. She added that maybe it's because of the complex magic of the tribe. Duke Shiwitz and Yuria got married, and just like every other couple, they had fights too. And that didn't surprise Ellie. Yet after having arguments and fights, he loved her a lot. She was the only one who could free him from generations of madness. Even though she was far from her tribe, he had no choice but to bring her with him. Every magic comes with a price that someone needs to pay, Baroness Amanta said. When His Grace went to quell the uprising of the rebels after 3 years, Yuria tried to break the curse all by herself. But after that incident, Duke Shiwitz broke relations with everyone, but he maintained relations with Duke Kleider. After a long wait of 2 years, Kleider's wife gave birth to a boy. And after that child's birth, Duke Shiwitz opened his castle's gate for the first time. But then Duke Kleider and his wife died in an accident. Ellie understood why Duke Shiwitz felt guilty about Damien. He blamed himself for whatever happened with Damien. Ellie could relate herself to Duke Shiwitz as she had also lost someone. Baroness Amanta got worried because of Ellie's face. She was sad. Baroness Amanta thought she shouldn't have said anything. She said she just felt bad about His Grace. Fiera told her that something about her reminded her of her son. Ellie asked if she also has a son. Fiera told her that she does have a son, but he's a lot older. She can't be friends with him. And also, he was busy at the mine with her husband. As soon as Ellie heard it, she thought of money. Ellie asked Lady Amanta if they could visit the mine. It was the mine. It was located in the desert. A man said he needs results and fast. It was Jared Amanta. He was thinking about how he can refine the sword. He was thinking that at this rate of working, he won't be able to make his mother happy and won't receive recognition also from his father. He was sad about that he may disappoint his father by not getting any use for him. Baron Amanta came there. He asked Jarrett why Lord Baron Amanta came there. Baron Amanta replied, does he need a reason to be there at his own mine? Jarrett was silent. Baron Amanta asked him if he found out more about the ore. Jarrett said he was not able to and apologized to his father. Jarrett flinched. Baron Amanta said he does not need to be in a hurry. He can take time for that. But Jarrett said no, he will do his best to make his lord proud of him and said not to worry. Baron Amanta was surprised. He said, so be it. Baron Amanta said, work hard, spare no effort, and bumped into Ellie. Ellie said, that hurt. Ellie and Baroness Amanta came to the mine. Baron Amanta asked why they were there and why Vieira was there too. Ellie greeted Lord Baron Amanta with a good day. Vieira said she knew that he wouldn't be pleased, but she wanted to visit the mine with Miss Ellie. Baron Amanta was worried about her as in the mine there were so many tools that can harm them. Ellie asked Jarrett what the blue thing behind him was. She asked if that was some kind of weapon or something. Ellie found out that the weapon was sparkling. She asked if she can touch it or not. Jared understood that the girl Duke Shiwitz chose for Lord Damien was here. He found her much smaller. He said to her that swords can be dangerous and she should not touch one. She got sad and said she understood. She also apologized to him. He didn't like that she was sad, so he said swords can be dangerous, so let him show her something else. Ellie got excited for that. Baron Amanta was about to stop them, but Baroness Amanta stopped him from doing that. Jared showed her a monocle. Monocle is used to power the mana stone. Ellie found it interesting. He showed her how to hold it near the eyes. She was getting dizzy as soon as she held the monocle. Jared told her to close one eye. Ellie was looking great with that monocle and asked him the way she was holding it. Baroness Amanta found her beautiful as well. Baroness Amanta said to Baron Amanta that this is what it may feel like having a granddaughter. Isn't that right, Marvin? Ellie was walking and saw something sparkling. She asked what if this. Jared said not to touch any of these. She didn't understand why not. Jared said that those ores are unique and they recently discovered it. Body heat makes them harden immediately, and once they are stuck it's hard for them to get them off. They have a strange substance too. She took a step away saying just like a monster. Jared asked her if she has seen a monster before. She said she hasn't, but Damien has seen one. She said before Damien was brought to the castle, he was encountered by monsters. He described them as frightened and once they grab you, they don't let go, Ellie added. Meanwhile, in the castle, Damien was busy with his practice. The teacher asked him what happened. He said he felt like Ellie took his name. Jared laughed and said that's true. Once they grab, they never let go. He remembered that when he was younger, he has seen something like that. Flags were raised. A guard on the horse orders other guards that to return to the castle once they make sure that there are no monsters in the rubble. They all said yes sir. It was Jared in a younger age. He saw something flickering. He was thinking that there were crystals also. He found it interesting. As he was about to touch the crystal, someone stopped him. It was Baron Amanta. He said that's a rare monster with special properties. Jared didn't understand how a monster. The lady standing beside said that it's a crystal outside like a sparkle gem. But you won't be able to remove it the moment it sticks to someone. The crystal may look so pretty outside, but inside that crystal can go deep inside human flesh. It was a monster. Both Jared and Baron Amanta figured something. They were talking alone. Ellie was happy that they've figured out that the mine was a monster den, and they will use the monster to make weapons. Even if the monster crystal touches one person for a moment of time, it is not possible to feel the toxin inside the crystal. But if someone holds it for a longer time, it enters the body and becomes a terrible and deadly weapon. Ellie was thinking that it was strange that someone actually thought to make monster weapons, and that defines that they are truly vessels of Duke Shiwitz. But she also recognized that the things were happening 3 years earlier than what was written in the book. Baroness Amanta said they should head back now. Ellie said that they didn't even talk much that day. Baroness Amanta had enough of that much talk with Ellie. Baroness Amanta thanked Ellie for doing something great for Baron Amanta and their son. Ellie didn't understand what she was talking about. Baroness Amanta said they should get back to the palace before it gets dark, or His Grace would get worried about her. Ellie held Baroness Amanta's hand. Baron Amanta and his son were still talking. It was already pitch dark night. The butler was explaining that Baroness Amanta agreed to meet Ellie 3 times a week. Duke Shiwitz said it was clever of her that she approached Baroness Amanta instead of the Baron. Duke Shiwitz was also relieved that from now on, the Baron will be able to focus more on his work. And by the name of Baron Amanta, the butler gave Duke Shiwitz a box, saying that Baron Amanta sent this to him. They opened it, and it was an arrow inside. Duke Shiwitz took out the arrow. The butler explained that Baron Amanta said the arrow is made up of newly discovered ore. Duke Shiwitz asked what kind of ore it was. The butler added that the ore was some sort of monster, and to make a weapon out of a monster was really a clever idea. Duke Shiwitz was worried about Baron Amanta due to his wife's condition, but he was managed to deliver something after all. But a sword would have been better after all. The butler said that this is just a start, and he'll make some new weapons as time passes by. He also said that he has understood why Duke Shiwitz was ready to take Miss Ellie under his wings. The butler told him that Miss Ellie was the reason for these discoveries after all. He was stunned that the child made this possible. The butler praised her too. Duke Shiwitz started thinking something. The reason why Duke Shiwitz took Ellie with him is that he thought Ellie might have some connections with the Emperor's family. Ellie may be young, but she was bold and clever, and this made him suspect that she is somehow involved with the imperial family. They may be using her to train Damien to submit to them. He also suspected that the death of Clyder was not an accident. and that was the reason he kept Ellie along with him in case she reveals some information about the Emperor. He had the doubt of having her connection with the Emperor. Someone was standing at the door and the butler noticed it. He took out his knife from his coat. He opened the door fully. He noticed that it was Ellie. Ellie greeted him. The butler asked her why she was there. She said she wanted to greet His Grace. The butler allowed her to meet His Grace. She was there because she wanted to hear more about the ore development. She thought the butler was a kind person, but she needs to be careful around him. Duke Shiwitz came and asked what's going on there. Ellie said she has something for His Grace. She took out the medicine. She said it's for His Grace's headache. She said that Royana mentioned His Grace suffers from a headache, so she brought him medicines. The butler laughed and said how cute she was and where did she find it anyway. She explained how earlier she had a headache, but she asked what the butler was hiding behind his back. The butler threw the knife away and said, "Look, there's nothing in my back." She said she might have been mistaken. His Grace asked her why did she take the trouble for. She said she was worried about him. His Grace didn't understand. The butler asked her if she can give him medicines because he was having a headache too. She gave the medicine to France. His Grace took the medicines from France. France didn't understand why did he asked. His Grace snatched the medicines from France's hands. France said His Grace was not sick in his life. His Grace asked Ellie why did she bring him medicines. He doubted her that she was there only for medicine. She understood that she was caught. He didn't fall for that trick. Her plan was to leave a good impression on Duke Shiwitz. She said he allowed her to choose a family all by her own, so she wanted to choose again a family. His Grace asked why she wants to pick a different family. He said picking a new family won't benefit her from the current agreement. Ellie knew he won't say yes. His Grace said he understood that she has her reasons. He asked her which family she wants to choose this time. She was surprised and said House Shiwitz. She said she wants him to adopt her. His Grace got confused. She wanted to leave. She was waiting for her turn to get old enough so she can run away. His Grace said don't be ridiculous. He hates inconvenience and fuss and also dislikes children. He gave her 3 red cards. She said she understands and leaves. France said Ellie is still young. He could have gone softer over her. His Grace said this medication is for children. Ellie is a child, and it makes sense to her that she took the medicines. It was laughable to even think that the pain of curse would go away by any simple medicine. And beside it was children's medicine and it even won't work on him. He was thinking that there may be a chance that Ellie is a spy from the Emperor. Even though he thinks like this, he still feels like Ellie is innocent. Ellie was in deep thought. She was thinking about the previous night's Duke Shiwitz's thoughts of accepting her as his daughter. She knew that Duke Shiwitz wouldn't accept her, but he was so rude in behavior. Ellie wanted to be his daughter rather than a daughter-in-law. She didn't want to go through the divorce ceremony after marriage with Damien. She thought maybe he didn't want to adopt the daughter of a thief that would threaten his reputation. Only 4 years remained for Damien's first war, and the female lead would appear 5 years after the war. With that being said, she only had 9 years left. Ellie had enough time to run away, as she thought. She was determined to find a source to survive and live happily until the female lead arrives. Baroness Amanda said it's truly an honor for her husband to train Damien under his assistant. Viera didn't believe it, so she asked her husband multiple times. Ellie felt amazing about Damien being trained by Baron Amanta. Her little hint at the mine was able to help Baron Amanta. Along with that, Baron Amanta got ready to train Damien as well. But she was worried about Damien's rude behavior. Baron may have agreed to teach him, but it won't matter if Damien refuses it. She didn't want that to happen, so she had to move quickly. Damien fell down. She rushed towards him. She was worried and asked what happened to him. Ellie saw his cheeks were red and he was sweating. She asked if he needs a doctor. He told her that he got tired, so he sat down. He was all right. That gave some relief to Ellie. Damien would not lie to Ellie. Baroness Amanta came and greeted Damien as well. She told him that by the looks of the night, it seems like it was a difficult training. As Baroness Amanta mentioned it, Ellie saw the looks of other knights as well. They were heavily breathing. She knew that Damien is going to be a sword master one day, but still, they need to be easy on him. She told him that she would visit him to watch him practice with his sword. She wanted to make sure that no one was bullying him. Damien wasn't getting bullied by anyone. She asked him again if he does not want her to watch him practice sword. He hesitantly said that's not what he meant. Damien said he's having a tough time, but the faces of other knights were like they were having a rough time. He said it will become easier if she visits him there. She recognized his expression. It was a feeling of guilt, but she knew that Damien would not lie, so she promised him to visit more often. Baroness Amanta said they both get along well, but knights were crying. Baron Amanta came inside there. He noticed that his wife and Ellie were already there before him. He didn't expect the 3 of them to be there in the training room. Ellie overheard that Baron Amanta has offered his help for Damien, so she came to visit him if that's not a problem for them. Baron Amanta said it's no issue, and on top of that, she has solved his big problem too. He also had planned to give something to Ellie, but he gave her that gift there. It was a bow. It was a gift for Ellie from Baron Amanta. It was for her, not for Damien. She understood that he gave her that bow because of her help in the mine. He must have got more information about the ore. The bow was also infused with some mana. She asked him that swords are more often used on the battlefield than bows. Baroness Amanta told her that the ability to forge a sword has a limit. She understood that Baron isn't skilled enough to forge a sword yet. Baron said Waybrock will be able to forge a sword maybe. Waybrock was a blacksmith who works at Shuit's castle. Every night their present was holding a sword made by that smith. Ellie thought, why didn't they ask him to make a sword? Baron told her that Waybrock is one eye blind, and the doctor has said he may lose sight in the other eye as well. She was annoyed when she got to know that even doctors can't cure him, but only if he was treated earlier he could have been good by now. But Waybrock refused treatment. She understood that if she kept asking such questions, Baron may suspect her. Baron asked her if she has any more questions for him. She knocked off the conversation by saying that her mother told her not to poke her nose into others' business. She already knew that Baron won't tell her the reason, so she didn't ask. She asked if they are going for training again and told them to remember that Damien is still a kid. She started walking away and was making sure to get more information about Waybrock. Damien held her cloth. She asked what happened. He said he does not like him at all. Ellie got confused. Why does he not like him? She was relieved that no one heard him saying that. She told him that Baron may look like an old man, but he's strong and too tall. He squeezed his wooden sword and said he's bad, because he was rude to Ellie. According to Damien, Ellie was a good person, and Baron got mad at her and made her look like a bad person. He started crying. Ellie patted on his back and said it's fine. He does not have to worry about her. She confronted him, saying he does trust her and that's enough for her. He understood that Ellie is telling the truth. She told him to trust Baron Amanta as much as he trusts Ellie. In the future, Baron Amanta will help Damien a lot. He agreed to what she said and told her if that's what she wants, he'll trust him. She hugged Damien as soon as he agreed to her. She remembered that in the original story Damien was not disliked by other people. She thought maybe it's because of her. She should be aside rather than there in the castle with him. She told him till his training, she will wait for him. Damien has to get stronger. Damien started training there. He blew a strike to Baron Amanta. Baron Amanta also took a step back and held himself. Damien again landed a strike, but Baron Amanta stopped him. France came there. He noticed that along with Lady Amanta, Ellie was there too with her. Ellie asked why France was there. He said it was the first day of training of Lord Damien, so he has to come. He noticed that Damien was holding the sword better already. They both were fighting. Ellie told France that Baron Amanta made this for her. It was a bow crafted from new ore. She was able to get Baron's trust, and she became more useful for him. France saw and said it seems like Baron was one step ahead of his grace. Ellie suspected him of hiding something behind his back, and he was not surprised nor impressed by what she said. She tried to see it, but he tried to hide it from her. A voice took their attention towards Damien. Damien was breathing heavily. She rushed towards him, but she didn't go there. France asked her if she wants to go to him. She wanted to go, but she resisted herself. She can't be there every time for him. He has to learn and carry his family name. He has to pick himself back up. Baron Amanta wasn't planning to spare him, but it turned out he got carried away. Damien yet had to learn a lot about swordsmanship. Baron Amanta was impressed by his ability to predict moves and land counterattacks. Even the knights battling in the battlefield won't be able to predict their opponent's moves, but he was able to predict it easily. Damien again landed a shot to Baron Amanta. Baron Amanta stopped the attack and thought maybe knights have taught him before he arrived. He saw their faces, and it looked like they really had a tough time with Damien. But yet still Damien was able to land his swords. Baron knew that Damien had already fought with monsters. Baron landed a strike, and Damien fell down. Baron told him to get up. The training wasn't over there. Baron Amanta was wondering if those experiences made him this much strong. He told him that there are two fundamentals in swordsmanship, offense and defense. Baron told him that he is good at defending himself, but he can't protect others at his current status. Damien again took his sword and stood up. Damien looked at Baron. Baron attacked him, and Damien lost his sword. With that, Baron said it was enough for the day. He told Damien to get enough rest, but Damien wanted to continue. Baron told him that once the opponent knows one's weak point, the swordsman has already lost. They'll continue after Damien gets some rest. Baron was talking to other knights. He looked back, and it was Ellie. Ellie was concerned about Damien, and Baron understood why his grace brought her. Ellie came to Damien. He was sad. She had never seen Damien with such a face before. She was hoping that he may not start hating Baron. Damien was determined to work hard. He wanted to be stronger. Ellie looked at him and smiled. He hadn't developed any hatred towards Baron, but rather he was more determined to get stronger. His goal was to be stronger than he was before. Ellie praised him, saying he is strong enough for today. But he wanted to be even stronger so that he can protect those he cares about. Ellie noticed that he says this to the main female lead when she appears. Ellie told him to eat more in order to be stronger than before. He asked why eating more, what's the difference? She told him eating more will eventually give him more power so he can fight 17 men at once. Ellie cleaned Damien and Royan called Damien and Ellie there. She was calling them for lunch. She asked them to hurry so lunch wouldn't get cold. She noticed France and Baroness Amanta as well there. She grabbed Damien's hands and Ellie and Damien headed inside the mansion. She told him to be less picky and he agreed to that too. Ellie was surprised to see this much cold outside. Damien was enjoying her company there and said it was still nice to be with her. Damien started copying Ellie as well. She asked if he started copying her as well. She pinched his cheeks and thought he's cute as always. Ellie directed a way to walk with Damien. Maid said that may be a dangerous path to walk. They should go somewhere else. Ellie asked what happened with the path. She asked why her maid was also holding her nose. Is there something that smells bad? Her maid Ashley had a sensitive nose. She told her that there's a stench coming from somewhere. Even the sweat in the training room was bothering her. Ellie didn't smell anything, but Ellie thought she might be the reason for that smell. Ashley told her that Lord Damien and she smelled like flowers. Ashley told them that she wanted to show a place to them. She asked them both to follow her. She took them to Red Lake. It was only kind there. Many people have drowned there because of the beauty of its color. She took them there because she wanted to warn them. Ellie was shocked when she got to know that people have died inside that lake. Due to so many incidents, rumors got spread around. It wasn't because of the mana in the lake bed, and that's the reason Ellie and Damien should be more careful. Ellie told Damien to be careful and Ashley told Ellie that she needs to be careful as well. A crack sound burst from somewhere. They both looked at the direction it came from. A man with an eye patch and long beard came there. He looked at them. Ellie asked who, and the man started drinking directly. Ellie sniffed and she smelled booze. Ashley said to the man that it's nice meeting him. It has been a while since they met. Did he remember her? She asked. The man looked and said he has told her it is not the place for children to be there. Ashley said she knows about it and a terrifying smell she got into her nose. Ellie noticed that she was having a hard time due to the bad odor coming from the man. Ashley apologized and said they'll be getting going. She said goodbye Waybrock. Ellie recognized him as the man who will forge Damien's sword. Maid told them to head back into the castle. After they came to the castle, Ellie asked Ashley that it was Waybrock, right, who makes weapons for everyone. That's what she heard from Baron. Ashley was tired after walking this much. She told them it was true but long ago. She asked if he stopped making weapons because of his one eye blind. Ashley told her that his daughter drowned in the Red Lake. Ellie got shocked. Ashley told her that it was long ago and everyone in the castle knows about it. Ellie understood why that man smelled like liquor. His daughter died and he got blind too. She felt bad for him. Ashley added that Waybrock only became like that after Lady Uriah died. He was suffering from his daughter's death when she arrived at the castle. Lady Uriah and Waybrock's daughter were the same age, and his depression got worse after talking with Uriah. But after that, Lady Uriah died, and he started drinking all day, and he resisted doctors' treatments as well. Ashley told them again that they should not go near the lake again, never. They agreed to that. She greeted good night to both and closed the door. She was thinking about her mother, and maybe that was the reason she couldn't get his story out of her mind. They both slept together. She couldn't stop thinking about it. She determined to be back there tomorrow. But she remembered her promise to Ashley. Ellie sneezed. She felt cold there. She thought she might have a cold because yesterday, all day she was out there. She didn't think that they would call a doctor after she sneezed only once. The doctor told her it was only a regular sneeze. She found out they are so kind. There, a home and castle physician came out of it. Crows attacked the physician. She thought he is treating Waybrock today. She rushed to the physician to ask about Waybrock. The physician said that they don't have to worry. Waybrock is going to lose eyesight in his other eye as well. She stopped there. The physician told him that Waybrock thinks deterioration is a part of the healing condition. She hid behind the trees. It was a man whom he was talking to through a small ball. The man said to the physician that he should do it more carefully. If Waybrock got out of the picture, there's no one to craft the weapons like him. That a sword that contains Duke's aura. Without the ability of weaponry, Duke Castle will grow slowly. That will be an opportunity for Duke Quinter to take over the weapon trade. The physician said he knows about that, and he's going to Duke Schuitz's house. Without Weibrock, House Schuitz is nothing. They were worried about the ore Baron Amanta took out should not be given to Weibrock in any case. The physician said he's taking care of that too. The physician asked the man if everything goes well, that man will give him some rights in the weapons business. The man said he won't lie to him. He said he's not doubting him. Just making a living is hard. Ellie came out and thought the physician is totally gone mad. Inside Weibrock's house, he woke up by the sound of crows. He found them louder than usual. He came out and said if they could be quiet. He noticed something as well. Ellie was near the river. He rushed towards Ellie, asking what she was doing. He took her hand and threw her away from the lake. He told her that it is truly dangerous to be like this. She woke up and with a big smile said, "Good day, sir." Weibrock was confused. He asked what was good about it. He asked if she was trying to get herself killed there. He thought maybe he yelled at her too much. He knew that people are afraid of him. He should not make Ellie cry at least. Ellie said sorry and thanked him for saving her. She was holding an arrow. He said he didn't save her and asked what she was doing there anyway. She gave him the arrow and said it's about this. She said it's neat. She got that as a gift. Weibrock was still confused with a look. She said she never shot any arrow before, but she didn't want to hurt as well, so she came far away from people. She knew he would be interested. She said she should give it to him then. He asked why him. You cannot take your eyes off it. He turned and said he cannot take anything from a child. He has a conscience. She said if she gave it to him, Lord Amanta would be sad eventually. She asked if he wants to take a look then. He agreed for a look. He looked at the arrow. He looked for a moment. Ellie got her plans done there. He got interested in the new ore. He asked her to come in or else she'll catch a cold. He opened the door, looked at his own house and thought that the house is a total mess. The smell of alcohol was strong as well. He directed her to a way to sit. He said he has to clean up for his surprise visitor. He was cleaning. Ellie started thinking that there are people who want Duke Schuitz to go down, and Weibrock's condition can be a good opportunity for them. She understood that they were the ones who caused him blindness in one eye and also they were planning to cause him in the second eye as well. And she can't let his visionary get worse. She saw medicine on the table. She took it into her hands and noticed the color of the medicine. She found it suspicious. Weibrock opened windows and Ellie got chilled. He said she's quite a handful. He fired the woods into the chimney. He sat there. She thought if he's eating enough or not. She asked him if he has something to eat for her. He said he does not have anything to eat. She asked what does he eat then. He didn't say anything. She said that he should eat something and should stay healthy instead of drinking alcohol all day. She quoted a sentence that if you eat well today, you'll live well tomorrow. He said it's been so long since he has heard that. He said he had a daughter, she was pretty smart and beautiful, and she fell into the lake she was looking at. He said it's all his fault. He said he didn't tell her to stay away from the lake. He was not strict on her. She said that was not his fault. She said her mother passed away because of her. She was not exactly an upstanding citizen. She just didn't want to justify what she did. It was bad, but she did it for her daughter. But if she heard her blaming herself for what happened with her mother, she would say that it's not your fault. If Weibrock's daughter could see him now, she would have said the same. They both looked at each other. We can see Ellie is trying to free Weibrock from his past guilt. She is trying her best. The woods were cracking into the fire. A few years back, someone had told him the same thing Weibrock said to Ellie. The person who told him that was no longer alive. But Ellie reminded him of that person. He sat there silently, thinking about that one person. Ellie was about to leave. She was worried they might scold her for staying out too long. Before leaving, Ellie said she was allowing him to have the arrow for that day only. He could repay by playing with his friends and with her after that day. She asked him if he would come to meet her again. He agreed to meet her and asked where he should find her. She said in the castle. He was shocked to hear about the castle. She smiled, but she smirked from inside. She ran from there, saying she would meet him tomorrow, but he wanted to stop her. She ran away, and he stood there silently. Weibrock thought Ellie was a maid at the castle. He held the arrow in his hands and thought that the night would be long. He was totally exhausted. He stayed up all night looking at the arrow. He wanted to take a look at the ore the arrow was made of. Weibrock was heading towards the castle. He thought nobody wanted to work with him as he hadn't picked up the hammer in 10 years. He came close to the castle, thinking about the last time he was this close to the castle. He was afraid to face his grace as well. He was also worried about smelling like alcohol in front of the kids. The gatekeepers asked Waybrock what he was there for. They asked again what was in his hands. He was holding an arrow. The gatekeepers were about to take out their swords and wanted him to identify himself. As he was about to say something, he realized that only a few people from the castle would recognize him. He didn't understand how he should explain everything to them. Someone opened the gate and said it was natural that the gatekeepers didn't recognize him because he had been gone for a long time. It was Lady Amanta. The gatekeepers asked her if she knew Waybrock. She said she did know that man well. She saw him and said, "It's been so long, Waybrock." He thanked Lady Amanta for helping him back there. Lady Amanta explained to him that no one would welcome him with open hands with an arrow in his hands. She told him to go inside a room with her as Miss Ellie was waiting for him. He didn't understand who Miss Ellie was. Then he realized that the child he met yesterday was no servant. Miss Ellie, along with Damien and Lord Amanta, were all sitting there. Ellie greeted him again as he entered. Ellie greeted Lady Amanta as well. Waybrock didn't understand why Lord Amanta was there. Even Lord Amanta didn't understand why Waybrock was there. Ellie said she wanted to introduce them both to each other. She said Waybrock was her friend, and he was more interested in weaponry. She added that the arrow Lord Amanta gave to Ellie, Waybrock liked that arrow and she wanted to have a conversation between Lord Amanta and Waybrock as they both were into weaponry. Lord Amanta didn't understand how the two met. Ellie asked Waybrock to sit there and talk. Baron Amanta understood that it was Ellie who called Waybrock and Viera went out to take him inside. Waybrock said yes because the guards didn't let him in. The Baron looked at Ellie. Ellie understood that the Baron was suspecting her. She suddenly changed the subject and asked about the arrow to Waybrock. Waybrock said he looked at the arrow very closely, and he wanted to apologize to her for yesterday. He didn't know she was related to Lord Damien. Ellie didn't mind at all about his behavior. The Baron asked him, now that he had looked at the arrow, what did he find? Waybrock said he was stunned. How did the Baron have the idea of making an arrow out of a monster? The Baron started explaining. Ellie smirked again because everything was according to her plan. Damien thought she was smiling because she likes cocoa. He gave her his cocoa. She asked him why he wasn't eating, and he said he wanted to give it to her. The Baron said that a sword would be better than an arrow, and he knew that Waybrock would say that to him. He further asked him if he wanted to make one sword with Amanta. The Baron said that with their talent, they could create something incredible. From that, the Baron understood that Waybrock's eyes were not fully healed. He asked why Waybrock was still refusing treatment. Waybrock didn't understand why he said that. He said that he had been treating himself for quite a long time. The Baron was shocked too. Waybrock further added that Dr. De'Aaron even gave him medicines. As Waybrock mentioned the doctor, he remembered that he didn't take the medicine that day. But for some reason, he was seeing everything clearer than usual days. Waybrock understood that the medicine could be something bad for his eyes. He asked Baron Amanta a favor. Ellie came there as well. Auntie, standing near his grace, said that every vassal house there should start giving their reports to his grace. The doctor looked at his grace, thinking that if Ellie and Damien got married, it could create a conflict within the imperial family. This might lead to the end of Duke Schuitz's house. Even if they seized control of weapons, they would still be in trouble. He was hoping that Viscount Quinter might have a plan for that. Duke Schuitz was sitting there with a glass bottle in his hand. The bottle had 2 medicines inside it. He remembered that Ellie had come to him to give him the medicine. Auntie didn't understand what those pills were because his grace was in a good mood the whole day. His grace said to begin. Viscount Quinter said he wanted to give his report from his territory. He showed a sword to his grace. He said it was not a bad sword and asked for the next Viscount. Viscount Quinter had produced a new weapon that was far better than anyone else's. Unlike their previous works, this sword was much lighter and easier to handle. Viscount Quinter unwrapped the sword from the cloths and presented it to his grace. He came to Duke Schuitz and held the sword in both palms. Viscount Quinter knew that only Waybrock used to produce blades for the Duke in the past. But if the Duchy of Schuitz did not deal with the rampant monsters, they would suffer huge damage. With that, they might have no choice but to use Viscount Quinter's blade. His grace didn't say anything. He asked Baron Amanta how his mine was doing with the newly discovered ore. Baron Amanta said everything was as always, good. His grace wanted to know what that meant. Viscount Quinter said he had heard Baron Amanta couldn't produce more than just an arrow. He also pointed out that the Black Lions and all the Schuitz houses used blades rather than arrows. Viscount Quinter taunted Baron Amanta, saying that arrows have no place but can be used for content purposes. Baron Amanta looked at him very silently. His grace was still holding the medicines. He paused and asked the doctor how Waybrock's condition was. The doctor and Viscount Quinter looked at each other. The doctor started saying that Waybrock was still refusing treatment for his condition. He further added that it might be due to some psychological factors causing him not to take the medicine. His Grace understood very clearly. His Grace took the sword Viscount Quinter was holding. He looked at the tip of it and said it was indeed light. Viscount Quinter got excited, thinking the Duke had finally accepted his sword. As the Duke was examining the sword, someone knocked on the door. Viscount Quinter didn't like that someone interrupted their meeting while His Grace was looking at the sword. His Grace let the person come in. The maid apologized for causing a disturbance in the meeting. She asked if Dr. D'Aaron was there. Dr. D'Aaron stood up. The maid said that Ellie was in deep pain due to the eye drops he had given her. The doctor asked what had happened to her. He said he had not given her any medicine before there could be a misunderstanding. She showed the eye drops he had given to Waybrock and asked if he had given this eye drop to her. D'Aaron saw the medicine and was shocked to see it was the same medicine he had given to Waybrock. It was a liquid made from cursed lake water to cause blindness in Waybrock's good eye. He didn't understand why Ellie was using it. He realized that if Ellie, who was to be Damien's wife, went blind, His Grace might have him executed. He took his bag and asked where she was, saying it was dangerous. The maid said she was told it was clearly a medicine. The doctor yelled at her, saying, "Who would tell you that nonsense? It was poison." He rushed and said he needed to examine her condition quickly. He asked again where she was. Waybrock came directly in front of him. The doctor asked why Waybrock was there. Waybrock said the medicine was fake. The doctor got very scared. Waybrock understood that the medicine he received was poison. People sitting there asked the doctor why he had given fake medicine to Waybrock, and someone asked how Waybrock's eyes were doing. The doctor understood that all this would fall on him and he would die alone there. The doctor got scared and told everyone he was just following orders from Viscount Quinter. It was Viscount Quinter who told him to do it. Viscount Quinter got scared and said he didn't know anything about that. The doctor said it was Viscount Quinter who wanted to kill Waybrock to weaken the military in the north. Viscount Quinter said the doctor was trying to blame him for the doctor's evil actions. The doctor said he had proof. He took out a ball from his pocket and started playing the recording. It was the conversation from the previous day where Viscount Quinter was talking about killing Waybrock and taking over the weaponry. Viscount Quinter was shocked to see that D'Aaron had recorded their conversation. His Grace said, "How amusing." He thought that the child was the cunning rat planning against him, but the person planning was so close to His Grace. His Grace took the sword in his hands. The sword had a flaming blaze coming from His Grace's aura. His Grace, with no emotion on his face, directly looked at Viscount Quinter. Those were the eyes of a murderer whose madness is quelled only when he spills blood. Viscount Quinter was shaking, seeing His Grace standing in front of him. His Grace used the Viscount's sword and pointed it towards the Viscount, saying he was right about the sword. It was lighter and easy to hold. If it is lighter, then it is easy to cut with the sword as well. His Grace's eyes were looking directly into the Viscount's eyes, and he noticed that His Grace's eyes were furious. If His Grace lost his temper, it would be a big loss for them. And he noticed that Waybrock came forward. He presented his sword after 10 years to His Grace. Waybrock thought that His Grace would not accept his sword as he hadn't been able to use a hammer in 10 years. His Grace said it had been a long time since a mere counterfeit had felt the same. His Grace dropped the Viscount's sword and took Waybrock's sword. From the moment His Grace held the sword, he was ready to use it in front of everyone. The Viscount was on the floor. Everyone started to leave the meeting room. His Grace shed blood on the floor. Even though His Grace accepted Waybrock's sword, Waybrock still doubted that His Grace would forgive him for the time he was gone. His Grace asked how long he needed to wait. Waybrock didn't understand. His Grace asked Waybrock how many times he needed to produce more swords. His Grace's knights needed his sword, and they also needed time to get used to it. Duke Shiwitz wanted Waybrock to do it quickly. Waybrock was flattered. He promised to bring the sword as soon as possible to His Grace. His Grace nodded to him while Auntie was dragging away the Viscount's body. Auntie was happy that everything between His Grace and Waybrock had worked out. Even Duke Shiwitz felt better after shedding some blood. But His Grace's aura was still blazing, perhaps because he hadn't calmed down yet. His Grace turned his head directly towards Auntie, and Auntie was shocked. His Grace started going out, and Auntie asked where he was going. Auntie tried to stop him, but His Grace was in a hurry. He burst through the door. Ellie was reading a book in that room. His Grace ran into her and looked directly into her eyes. He started shaking her, asking what had happened to her eyes. He had heard that she used some sort of eye drops that caused her blindness. His Grace was making Ellie dizzy. His Grace stopped. She was worried that His Grace might have found out that she lied about her eye illness. His Grace's clothes were covered in blood, and she understood that things had turned out well. But she thought maybe she should have gone there and acted like she actually dropped something into her eyes. Roina saw His Grace there and was worried. She didn't know His Grace was visiting Ellie and hadn't prepared anything for his arrival. Auntie rushed there too, asking His Grace why he was in such a hurry without saying a word. Auntie noticed that His Grace was standing close to Ellie. He came directly to His Grace and said he needed to go outside quickly, but His Grace denied. His Grace looked at Ellie and made sure she was fine. Auntie and His Grace came out. Auntie felt disappointed. His Grace asked what was with the disappointment. Auntie asked how come he did not understand. If His Grace knew, why would he have asked Auntie? Auntie gave a handkerchief to His Grace and said to wipe off the blood from his clothes. His Grace asked why. Auntie said for Miss Ellie, wipe off the blood. Auntie explained that His Grace was familiar with bloodshed, but the same did not go for Ellie as she was still young. He said that Ellie could have gotten scared if he went with blood on his hands. Even other children would have been shocked if they saw him covered in blood. A maid came from inside and said His Grace had dropped a bottle. It was the glass bottle with medicine inside it. The maid said that she was the one who gave the medicine to Ellie when she said she had a headache. She must have given those to His Grace. Auntie said if he were in His Grace's place, he would have taken the pills. He said taking medicine wasn't a problem if he was sick and ill-tempered. His Grace snatched the handkerchief from Auntie. His Grace looked at the handkerchief and imagined Ellie. His Grace asked if other knights also carried handkerchiefs with them or not. Auntie said they didn't usually carry one. His Grace ordered Auntie to provide handkerchiefs to each knight because who knows when they'll have to clean their blood. His Grace wiped his hands. He thought any fabric would be best but then started thinking about something. He thought if the towel gets rough and Ellie gets a scratch because of it, then it would be wrong. So he added that the fabric should be soft. He ordered that Ellie choose the fabric. There could be a moment when Ellie may ask for a handkerchief from the knights, so they better choose a nice pattern as well. His Grace also ordered Roina to tell the other maids to get ready with sewing as His Grace wanted them to make flowers on the scarves. He made Auntie the in charge of the distribution of handkerchiefs to knights. Auntie and Roina were both speechless with the actions of His Grace. Then His Grace walked out of there. Auntie didn't understand what happened to His Grace all of a sudden. The carriage stopped somewhere. Lord Damien and Ellie have arrived in the market, the maid said. Ellie and Damien were both fascinated by seeing so many people there. It was the Pelline district in the duchy. Ellie got out of the carriage. She noticed that the market was full of people, some buying and some selling goods. The maid was concerned that Ellie didn't go to the Schuetz family shop but rather came to the public market. It was the first time His Grace had allowed her to go out of the castle. Ellie liked the market a lot and said it was all fine for her. She wanted to talk with market merchants and gather information, as she would need to start a business after running away from the mansion. This was her opportunity to get information from the local market people. They began to look for clothes. Ellie held Damien's hand tightly because there were so many people, and she didn't want him to get lost again. Damien was worried that Ellie might let go of his hand in the crowded place. Ellie reassured him that if he wanted, she could hold his hand too. Ellie understood that Damien was scared because of the crowd. Damien asked her again if she wouldn't let go of his hand, and she agreed. They started to browse the shops. They came across a shop selling weapons at a cheaper price. Ellie saw and understood that many things in the north were sold to deal with monsters. Ellie and Damien bought something to eat and were eating it near the carriage. Ellie noticed that Damien had sauce on his face. Damien didn't seem to notice. She was worried about how to wipe the sauce from his face. The knight standing behind her handed her a handkerchief. Ellie thanked him. It was Sir Rainer, who was also into fancy things. She wiped the sauce from Damien's face. Ellie had seen everything and wanted to know more about the products in detail. A man sitting there with products asked if Ellie was interested. Ellie said yes, as those items were unique to her. The shopkeeper smirked and said they were highly pricey, so he was stopping her. If she had that kind of money, only then could she have a look. Suddenly, he stopped talking as Sir Rainer and the maids arrived. Ellie wanted to have a look at those things. She asked what was in the bottles. The shopkeeper said they were healing potions. He got so scared he allowed Ellie to have a free look around the shop. He said that those healing potions treated light bruises but visiting a priest might be more effective. Ellie found that those potions were too costly for a minor effect and going to the temple would be much better to help with the Duke's madness. Even if they couldn't cure his grace, poor people used to buy those healing potions as they were not rich enough to hire a priest with divine power. The maid took a step and asked why Ellie was interested in healing potions if she wasn't hurt. Ellie told her she was planning to give those healing potions to his grace when he lost his temper. The maid advised her to buy one and gift it to his grace. In the duchy, it was a tradition that when kids go out for the first time, they buy gifts for their family. Ellie thought about giving him a gift but remembered that he didn't take the medicines she gave him. He might get angry and say, "How dare she give me a gift anyway?" She thought he wouldn't like it. She passed on the healing potion and said she might look for something else. The maid agreed. At an earring shop, Ellie saw some earrings she liked. The shopkeepers insisted she try one if she liked. A few gems in the earrings were totally like Damien's eyes. Damien was looking at something and thought it would look good on Ellie. She bought one of the earrings from the shop. As she finished shopping, she asked her maids to head out. But those maids were jealous. She understood that they wanted her to buy gifts for them as well. Ellie understood that her relationship with the maids was because of Duke Schewitz. But they were really nice to Ellie, so she thought maybe to show her gratitude she should gift something to them. She was concerned about her choice for them. She didn't understand what if they didn't like it and hated it. Suddenly, the crowd started to gather. The shopkeeper announced that it was free to look and not expensive to buy. People started praising the earrings the shopkeeper had. Ellie noticed that the shop was getting crowded all of a sudden. She noticed a boy there doing something. He stole an earring. She asked Damien if they could look around other shops. She understood how Duke Schewitz felt when she slipped the gem into the Viscount's coat earlier. She tried to ignore the boy because it was not her concern. But she could be doing business someday and couldn't let crimes go unnoticed. She grabbed his hand and asked what he was doing. The boy asked who she was. She said she saw him stealing from there. His parents couldn't believe what she was saying. She understood that this was it. She could give her first gift to Duke Schewitz. His parents apologized and said he was just a young boy and they didn't know about that. Sir Rainer looked directly at the kid without any expression. The man got scared and started scolding his son, saying why did he steal and didn't apologize. The man apologized to Sir Rainer and said he was looking after the kid, but the kid still seemed to stick his fingers here and there. The man was ready to give the child for execution or to be held as a slave for his deeds. Those were the consequences, after all, he said. The kid got scared and said the man made him do it. The man had taken something from the kid and in return for bread. He wanted the kid to steal the earrings, the kid said. The man said the kid was totally lying and called him a liar. The man slapped the kid so hard that the kid fell to the ground. Ellie got angry. She could not believe how someone could do that to a child. Ellie understood that they were not his real parents and they were using him for their selfishness. Ellie yelled at him, saying he committed a crime by hitting a child he barely even knew. The man pushed Ellie and wanted her to stop running her mouth. Everyone got concerned about Ellie and asked if she needed a physician. The maids and Damien looked at the man with anger in their eyes. The man and the woman standing there understood that they had made a mistake. They started running, and Sir Rainer started chasing them. Ellie was not hurt and asked Damien to help her get up. She saw that the boy was still sitting on the ground. He looked at Ellie with anger. Ellie gave him the bracelet. The boy didn't understand how she took it out of his pocket. Ellie saw him putting his hand in the man's pocket, trying to take something from him. She understood that the man took his bracelet and that's why he was helping the man. Ellie told him not to steal again. The kid thanked Ellie as the bracelet was the only thing left behind by his parents. He offered to repay her someday. Ellie asked if he needed something to eat. She bought him bread and milk for him and his siblings. He told Ellie that he lived in an orphanage and if she needed help, she could find him there. Ellie understood that he was mature enough to have a sense of humor. He introduced himself as Grace. It turned out that the boy was actually a girl. She recognized her as the main character from the storybook. Grace was a holy knight. She risked her life to protect the female lead. Ellie was looking at Grace's face. Ellie found her very handsome. She remembered that the book mentioned Grace being a woman, but she didn't expect this. Grace thought there was something on her face, so she asked Ellie. Ellie told her that her face was handsome. Grace even said that Ellie was pretty as well. Grace didn't understand whether to thank Damien or not. Damien was shy around Grace due to his hard life. Sir Rainer arrived, having caught both thieves. Ellie was relieved to know that Sir Rainer caught them both. The maids were still concerned about Ellie because she had fallen and might have gotten hurt. One of the maids brought her medicine as she didn't know where Ellie was hurt exactly. Ellie was stunned that her maids managed to arrange medicine for her while she was talking to Grace. Ellie assured them that she was okay. The maids were glad to hear that. The maid said if they were both okay, it was good to go back to the carriage. It was not safe for Ellie to walk there alone. She asked Sir Rainer to help them. Sir Rainer took them both by the hand. The maid instructed to take the two thieves in another carriage. Ellie hadn't finished her shopping yet and they were going back home. She asked Ivana, Ashel, and May that she hadn't seen the entire market and wanted to look around a bit more. She said she would stick with Sir Rainer and if she felt low, she would come back to the carriage. The maids agreed to her request and went to get the other knights together. Grace understood that Ellie was from a noble family and felt a bit jealous of her. Ellie said goodbye to Grace and gave her some medicine. She was worried about her future as she planned to run away and wanted Grace to protect Damien. Grace just stood there, not understanding anything. In the castle, Waybrock and Baron came with a sword to present to his grace. They gave a new sword to his grace. His grace was glad that Waybrock's skills hadn't rusted a bit. As he picked up the sword, someone knocked on the door. It was Ellie and Damien to greet his grace. Both Waybrock and Baron greeted Ellie and Lord Damien. They knew about Ellie's first outing. Ellie explained how they saw so many things and enjoyed their time. Ellie told them how fascinating it was for her to watch people with quick hands, but they were sloppy. It was silent there. Suddenly, Auntie changed the topic in a hurry. Ellie showed them the earrings she bought. Auntie knew that his grace did not have his ears pierced, yet he might not mind taking a gift. The earrings were pretty, Auntie said, and she gave them to Damien. She didn't know she bought them for him. She thought they would look good on Damien. Auntie was shocked, and his grace froze. Even Damien had a gift for Ellie. It was a necklace. It was pretty, and Ellie liked it. They both bought something for each other. Ellie wanted him to try the earrings. Baron thought they were closer than they had thought. His grace grabbed the handle. Auntie was worried, so he ran to Ellie and asked if she bought something for his grace. She did have a present for his grace as well. She called Sir Raynor. Sir Raynor was able to track down the pickpocket group operating in the duchy. Sir Raynor further explained that Miss Ellie was able to identify them. Ellie was lucky, and this was a gift to his grace. Auntie was shocked because this was an incredible present. Baron was jealous of Ellie. Both Baron and Waybrock looked at his grace, who was shocked, not saying a word. Auntie understood that his grace wanted only a small thing from her. Ellie wiped Damien's head. Ellie asked how Damien's day was. Damien was happy to be with Ellie all day and was able to buy a gift for her. Ellie was happy for the gift as well. For Ellie, Damien was pretty, but he wanted to be handsome, not pretty, just like Grace. It seemed like Ellie's compliment for Grace bothered Damien. Damien was already showing his new feelings about his appearance. Ellie told him that being handsome is good, and according to her, Duke Shiwitz was the most handsome. Damien got sad. He was worried that Ellie liked only handsome guys, not pretty ones. So she consoled him, saying pretty guys are the best and she likes them a lot, and Damien is pretty with handsome. Somehow, she managed to make him happy again. Ellie was very tired because raising a child isn't easy at all. Damien thought maybe Ellie was hurt or something. She said she was faking it. Damien didn't understand why she faked. She told him that faking is much better than being fooled by others. She faked it so they could catch the bad guy. She told Damien that if there is anything he wants, he should not give up on it, but he should not do anything immoral or unethical. If he gives everything to get what he wants, he'll surely get it, she said to him. According to the novel, there are two rival lovers of Damien. They were Prince Fabian and Prince Matteo. They will cause Damien an incredible amount of pain and suffering. So that's why she was trying to help Damien to get a happier life after all. Damien slept beside Ellie, mumbling that he wants to stay with Ellie. An arrow was shot by Ellie. She was practicing her archery with Baroness Amanta, who mentioned that Ellie's skills were improving. Baroness Amanta said that Ellie was talented, which made Ellie feel shy. Ellie never knew that Lord Amanta would give her a present. Upon that, Baroness Amanta said Ellie was going to be her family member, so it was nothing. As soon as Ellie heard family, she remembered how in her past everyone treated her badly. She didn't want to think much about it, as she didn't want to set her expectations high because she was not going to be their real family member. Everyone was just following the Duke's order to adopt Ellie. She didn't want to be part of their family. The Duke only adopted her because he thought Ellie might be of some use. She thought to do her best. Baroness Amanta didn't understand what Ellie was talking about doing her best for. Ellie didn't want to cause any inconveniences to Lord Amanta, her, and Sir Jarrett in their house. Baroness Amanta told her that being family doesn't always have to be blood-related. Love and taking care of someone you love also come under the definition of family. She quoted something that being born into this world alone is enough for those around you. Ellie did not need to push herself for anything. She was more than enough as she was. Ellie was glad because no one had ever told her that before. At that moment, Sir Jarrett arrived. He called for Ellie. Ellie greeted him. Sir Jarrett was also practicing his archery. What a coincidence it was. Ellie thought he might have come to ask about the bow. She gave feedback that the bow was wonderful and comfortable for her. She was happy with the bow. It was a relief for him that Ellie liked it. He made sure to craft something that Ellie would like. He insisted on helping Ellie and teaching her how to shoot an arrow. Ellie agreed to that. He started demonstrating how to shoot an arrow. Baroness Amanta hadn't seen her son happy for so long. She teased him, saying that if she knew, she would have given him a younger sister. Ellie pretended she didn't hear anything. She changed the subject, saying that Waybrock was making a sword these days. Waybrock had to make thousands of swords, but he had to do it alone, which was totally impossible for him. Everyone was giving their best to make everything possible faster. Jarrett asked Ellie if she was ready to shoot again. As Jarrett was teaching her how to shoot, she understood that Waybrock had to deal with monsters to make a sword. And yet, he was alone. It would be good to find him an assistant. Nobody ever thought of giving him an assistant. Ellie wasn't paying attention and shot her arrow too high. She went to get the arrow. She found the arrow and was glad it didn't go too far. A shadow appeared. She didn't understand what it was. Suddenly, rain clouds came out of nowhere and crows started flying. She was scared and didn't understand what was going on. She held her arrow tightly. The crows weren't flying away, rather they were coming after Ellie. Someone might have done this to set her up. A crow came down. It was bigger than Ellie thought. She was shocked to see such a big crow. Ellie was shaking and told the crow not to come near her. She didn't understand why the crow was cawing. It was as if the crow understood her perfectly. The crow opened its big wings, and a man appeared out of nowhere. Ellie couldn't believe her eyes that a crow had turned into a human. What kind of crow was that? The man recognized Ellie as the child from the lake. He asked if she was close with that hammer. She didn't understand what hammer he was talking about. More crow people came. They heard that she had treated his eye sickness. They were talking about Waybrock. Ellie thought they might be angry that she helped Waybrock with his eye problem. They might be his enemy. It turned out that Ellie had saved their master. Ellie was absolutely blindsided. The crows knew from the start that she would treat their master's eyes the moment she arrived at the castle. They were able to read people's faces. They were fascinated by the arrow Waybrock made. Ellie still didn't understand what they were talking about. She didn't understand why they were calling Waybrock their master. She noticed that those crowmen were touching the arrow with their bare hands, and it was not causing them any harm. She smiled and found something intriguing. Ellie understood that she could use them as assistants for Waybrock. She smiled, realizing she could help Jarrett and Waybrock. As she was asking for their help, Jarrett arrived and asked who those men were. He ordered them to leave Miss Ellie alone. Jarrett was worried about Ellie being alone and guarded her. Jarrett didn't understand how they came to the Duchy of Schwitz and went after Ellie. The crowman understood that Sir Jarrett mistook him and apologized for his behavior. They explained that they were there to thank Ellie for what she did. Ellie didn't understand what she did. They explained that meeting her was their only intention from the start. They said not to be afraid of anything. They only wanted raw talent to help them make the strongest weapon in the world. Ellie didn't understand why a clan would be dedicated to weaponry to make the strongest weapon. Their clan was mentioned in history. In the past, their clan made a weapon used by the imperial family. The sword contained strong divine power in their clan's mana. The sword was so strong that it could destroy evil beings. Maybe those crowmen belonged to that clan. Ellie thought. Their leader had died, and ever since, they had not been able to make the strongest weapons. They saw Hammer's sword, loved Waybrock's sword, and wanted him to be their clan's new master. But all of a sudden, Waybrock locked himself in his house and stopped making those weapons. After Ellie came and saved his eyesight, he could make new swords again. For the crowmen, Ellie was a savior. Ellie stared at them in disbelief. She liked it but didn't understand what was going on. She realized that if they considered her their savior, they would take her and Waybrock's opinion seriously. It wouldn't be hard to ask them to work with Waybrock. She asked if Waybrock knew about their clan. Waybrock didn't know about their clan, only they knew him. But they were ready to be taught by Waybrock and make him their master. She was shocked to hear that. She asked them if they wanted to repay her. Jarrett interrupted Ellie and asked if she understood what they were saying. Ellie didn't understand what he meant. She said she could totally understand them. Jarrett looked at her with a strange expression. She realized she was the only one who could understand them. According to Talon, the crowman, a person who belongs to a mystical tribe and lived near the world tree, could understand non-human languages. It was because the blood had been transferred from ancestors to generations. When she thought about it, she remembered something from the book story. It was said that only members of the imperial family could talk to animals. She was just an ordinary kid but wondered if she might belong to the imperial family or live near the mystical tribe. She understood everything. Jarrett asked what happened to her. She understood why Sir Jarrett didn't understand anything when Talon was talking to her. It must have sounded weird when they were talking. She didn't know the reason, but she might have some strange skills that helped her understand. She asked Talon if he could speak to all humans. He said he could understand humans well, but when it came to talking and expressing emotions, they were not good at it. They often got into sticky situations because of that. Ellie smiled and said she knew a way they could repay her and learn from their master. She took them to Waybrock. She said if it looked like she was blackmailing him, then he should wave his hammer. Waybrock waved his hammer. Waybrock thought she was mocking him. Jarrett introduced them as Ellie's new friends. It was hard for Waybrock to make swords alone, so Ellie brought them there. She told him that they liked making weapons and introduced Talum, saying that Talum wanted to work under Waybrock. Talum suddenly got close to Waybrock because he was ready to be his assistant. Everyone there started yelling, "Master's apprentice." She explained how Talum's clan makes amazing and strong weapons and it was their fate. They were ready to forge swords with Waybrock, but they could not speak much of their language, although they could understand it very well. Waybrock didn't understand why they wanted to be apprentices. Talum noticed something behind his back. It was a monster crystal. He told Ellie they needed to use that. They thought Waybrock might be doubting their skills, so they wanted to show their skills to him. Ellie didn't understand what they would make now. Talum smiled and said it was the thing she was holding. He was talking about an arrow. He wanted to make one for her, and that would be the best so far. She didn't understand why an arrow. They wanted to make one arrow that's far better than ever before. They started beating the crystal with a hammer over the metal. They were successful in making an arrow. It was amazing and they made it faster than ever. Compared to weight, it was a little lighter than what Baron Amanta gave her. Talum was feeling proud as his savior was praising his work. Even Waybrock didn't believe that they made it so fast. They had no problem touching the monster ore as well, Jarrett said. Jarrett remembered the story of a clan that used to make swords for the imperial family long ago. He had doubts that the crowmen may belong to that clan. Ellie and Talum were hopeful that Waybrock might accept him now. She asked Waybrock whether he would accept him or not. Waybrock appreciated his work and talent. Waybrock and Sir Jarrett looked at each other and called Miss Ellie. Sir Jarrett wanted them to work there with Waybrock, so he asked Ellie to approach them about it. He wanted more people to work there to prepare swords faster and know how to forge weaponry. Sir Jarrett agreed to help them out, but he wanted them to help Waybrock as well. She smirked as this was her plan from the start. She wanted them to work there with Waybrock. She made it look hard. She acted like maybe they didn't want to work with Waybrock. They only wanted his apprenticeship. She still asked them. The crowmen were worried about whether their master liked their weapon or not. They were concerned about it. She talked with them. Their master liked their weapon, but still, one thing remained. She told them to watch her facial expressions and maintain it. She told them to snort through their nose, and it would be better if he rejected it. He said it directly, no way, never, in an attitude manner. Sir Jarrett and Waybrock couldn't understand their language, which was beneficial as this would put an impact on them that they are negotiating. But communication is impossible without Ellie as well. She wanted to take the claim from this. From her point of view, nothing comes free after all. It was evening, everyone was clapping. Jarrett seemed to be pleased. He was happy because it would eventually make Baron Amanta happy. He hadn't made any breakthrough since, but Baron might be happy after how things turned out to be. Baroness Amanta was happy for her son as well. Baron Amanta knew how hard Sir Jarrett was working there. Sir Jarrett always looked forward to impressing his father. It was strange, but things turned out easy ever since Ellie came to Manson. Mother pointed out something. That's the reason why Sir Jarrett recommended her to learn more about trade and business. Sir Jarrett was blushing, but he wanted to work with Ellie more. He wouldn't have talked with Talum earlier if Ellie was not there. She did help them a lot, and Sir Jarrett praised her for her talent. After the completion of her education, Ellie maybe she'll make an excellent merchant. He wanted to speak more about Ellie just like Baron Amanta. Ellie was so talented, wherever she goes she will be loved. Definitely, Baroness Amanta said. Even if people continue to call her daughter of a thief, Jarrett didn't want Ellie to get hurt more. He asked his mother to talk about Ellie's abilities to talk with shapeshifters. Those abilities are rare. If Baron Amanta knows about that, then he would. And Baroness Amanta stopped him. She told him to not to think about it. He asked why. She told him that she may have special abilities, but all the mystical tree tribe died in war. And there was one possibility that she may have such ability because she has imperial blood. Jarrett was angry that how could her mother say something like this regarding Ellie. Ellie may seem to be of imperial blood, but they were not sure about that too. It was never revealed what exactly her mother stole from the palace. They thought her mother actually stole a child rather than jewelry from the imperial palace. Empress Carthia will do anything to make her child as new king, the crown prince. They wanted to keep it a secret about Ellie's abilities not to be revealed. Jarrett agreed to that. Ellie was not able to sleep at night due to what happened with her that day. She was wondering how she can enter the market as Sir Jarrett recommended her to learn more about trade. It was time for her to put her ideas out to the market. She was thinking that if the product came out good enough, then she can ask for profit as well. She has to choose a product that's not common and competitive. Damien was fast asleep, so sneaked out of there. She was feeling cold and walking with a lamp. The lights were off, and she seemed to be spooky. She thought maybe a ghost would come out there. She saw something, though it's a ghost. It would be cool to meet a ghost while working on her new plan. Duke Schuetz and Auntie were standing there. She didn't understand what they were doing late at night. Auntie apologized and raised his sword to attack on his grace. She didn't understand what was going on there. Blood dripped off. Why Auntie stabbed his grace. Auntie noticed that Miss Ellie was there. He asked what she was doing there. She was worried about why he had attacked his grace. Auntie explained that he and his grace were training, but Ellie didn't seem to believe it. She raised her hands and said she might be a child, but she knew something was wrong. She was trying to protect his grace. Auntie was worried that she was standing close to his grace and called her to his side rather than his grace's side. She looked back at his grace. His eyes were all red. He seemed like a different person. She understood that Duke Shiwitz was mad. It was his madness in his eyes. She noticed that he was hurt all over his body as she stood close to him. It was a curse that required him to see blood to calm down his madness. But she didn't understand why he hadn't attacked Auntie if he was already mad. She grabbed his hands. His hands were bleeding. He calmed down a bit. He asked Ellie what she was doing there. She was concerned about his grace. His grace thought she was afraid because she was worried about him. She told him that she wasn't afraid of anything. She knew that if he wanted to kill her, he would have already done it to someone else due to his lost mind. She didn't sense any fear from his grace and just smiled. He looked at her with calm eyes. His wounds were slowly closing. It wasn't a healing power or magic. Ellie was calm and didn't fear the sight of so much blood, which his grace noticed. His grace asked how many times she had seen blood. At that time, Ellie wasn't actually acting like a child. She came up with a story about her aunt. How back when she used to live on the streets, her aunt always got injured whenever she met them. That was the reason it may not bother her. His grace ordered her to go back inside and forget what she saw. She shouldn't have seen him in that situation, he said. Auntie requested that she follow him until they reached her room. She was still concerned about his grace. She asked if he wasn't going to sleep. His grace used to have nightmares, which were the problem causing him not to get enough sleep. She called his grace and asked if she could help him to sleep. She explained how back in the orphanage, when Damien and Ellie held their hands before sleeping, they didn't have nightmares. She insisted that she stay by his side so he wouldn't have nightmares. She wanted his confirmation. She didn't know that he would actually agree to that. She came inside his grace's bedroom. As she was sitting at the corner of the bed, she saw his grace changing his clothes. She was baffled by his body and thought, would he actually change his clothes in front of a child? He saw her looking at him. She quickly turned her head away. She said she didn't see anything to his grace. He came to her and asked how she was going to put him to sleep. She assumed him to be an arrogant cat. She was glad that he was actually following her. She told him to lie down. He asked what she was doing. She covered him with a blanket. She told him that since his chest was always visible, it would be easier for him to sleep if he was warm. He just dismissed her words. She totally covered him with the blanket. He couldn't take it anymore and felt smothered. She turned him into a burrito. She was smiling because he didn't complain about anything. As his grace was thinking she was about to sing a lullaby for him, she insisted that she could if he wanted. But his grace didn't want to experience a nightmare. He asked if she didn't have bad dreams like other children. She had always been a sound sleeper. Her reality was more horrible than a dream. She realized that she needed to answer like a child and suddenly started talking about trash food and so much work. His grace asked about her mother's name. She was confused why he asked about her mother. She clenched her skirt. Talking about her mother had never ended well. Her mother's name was Shannon. She was worried that if Duke Shiwitz hates her for being the daughter of a thief, he thought this was a ridiculous idea. She asked, which idea? She was horrible at putting people to sleep. He asked how she even managed to put children to sleep without them having any nightmares. But that never happened to any children. She told him to go to sleep. It was late at night as well. That was something a child shouldn't say to an adult. But Duke Shiwitz was feeling sleepy. She yelled that it worked. She told him that it would definitely work. He taunted her, saying his body had decided to sleep rather than talk to her. She froze as she found it rude. He apologized to Ellie for what she saw that night and apologized for suspecting her all the time. By then, he went to sleep. She stood there, not understanding what he meant by that. He suddenly went to sleep. She was glad that she helped him sleep. She just forgot about the sentence and thought it may not mean anything. She found him ugly while sleeping. She said, "Sweet dreams," and closed the doors. Duke Shiwitz went to sleep as well. In the morning, the bell rang. 3 women in white dresses gave blessings, saying that the sun and the world tree bestowed their blessings upon them. A woman with 4 children was standing in front of the 3 women. The women thanked the other 3 women for their blessings. The women were there to pass the blessing of God to the people. Whenever priests visit, kids get something to eat. Children were waiting for the food those women brought for them. It was Ellie in one of the cloths. That boy noticed it. Ellie was a priest. He called for Ellie. She went there, and he said, "It's Grace, it was good to see her again." When her hood was taken off, Grace noticed that it was not Ellie. The women got angry at Grace for what she was doing with the priest. She let go of her hand as she thought it was her friend Ellie. The priest didn't mind. "She might look a lot similar to Ellie," she said. Grace told her that she belonged to a different family and it had been so long since she last saw her. "Ellie has pretty green eyes just like the priest." She found it quite odd as no one in the territory had green eyes. Grace didn't understand how. She added that no one in the north has green eyes. She held Grace's hand and asked about her friend Ellie. They said safe travels and to come visit again next time. The girl hugged a small girl and gave her blessings. All work got done by the nuns. The sister felt disgusted after kissing an orphanage child's forehead. But she got information that there's a girl with green eyes same as her. She has tolerated everything because of her intentions. The other sister sitting next to her told her that her eyes were almost green that day. Ovli didn't understand what she meant. Her eyes looked orange due to the sunlight facing her directly. Ovli was feeling tired after blessing so many people. She asked her to wake up her when they reached the temple as she was about to go for sleep. The other nun agreed to that. Ovli slammed her hand on the table. She used the drink option to retain the green eyes, but it stopped working soon. As she drank the potion, her eyes went back to normal. The ball was buzzing. A voice came from the ball that it's still about the old trick yet. It was her father. She found a way to get closer to Duke Shiwitz. His father thought maybe the Kleider boy he heard the news about was how Duke Shiwitz found him. She couldn't believe that they've found a boy. It was expensive to send her to the temple just because she said she would find the boy on her own. He called her daughter a fool. She felt guilty, but her father advised her to find a better way. He reminded her that if it wasn't for wench Yuria, then she would have been the one who had married Duke Shiwitz. He wanted to get free from being the Empire's lapdogs. She never thought of being part of Shiwitz's family as her father wanted first, but now she wants to be part of it too. She was ready to do anything to be Duke's side even if she has to marry Damien. Duke Shiwitz warned a girl about the monster over the place. If she didn't want to end up her life, she must be careful. It was a backstory of her and Duke Shiwitz. She thought as they both were lonely, they could be a perfect match for each other. The call got disconnected after her father ordered her to report back to him. Ellie made a new hairstyle for Damien and showed him the mirror to look at himself in it. It was kind of awkward, but Ellie found it cute. Ovli was ready to do anything just to take her place. Ellie fired an arrow, and her maids cheered her on, saying she was the best. She shot another arrow which hit the bullseye again. The maids praised her once more. They were so impressed that they started tossing her in the air in celebration. All three maids were happy for her. Then she saw Sir Raynor there. Everyone present was a hardcore fan of hers. His Grace watched them from his room as they cheered for Ellie. France informed him about how they had busted the gang of thieves. They were also able to discover their hideout when they interrogated the thieves who were related to wanted criminals. France noticed that his Grace was watching Miss Ellie and her servant playing in the garden. Ellie was shooting arrows upside down and showing off her skills while everyone cheered for her, including Sir Raynor. Ellie thoroughly enjoyed archery. His Grace smiled and said that she did like it after all. He handed her an arrow to shoot and expressed his desire to watch her shoot arrows. He walked out, and France was shocked. He kept calling for his Grace, but he didn't stop. France, being old, was breathing heavily. His Grace asked Raynor why he was carrying Ellie. Ellie was feeling tired, so Raynor was helping her back inside. Ellie greeted his Grace as well. His Grace was concerned if she was hurt or not. She was not hurt but wanted to rest before her arms started hurting again. His Grace understood but didn't say anything. He asked Raynor about his son. Raynor said he has 3 sons. Suddenly, his Grace lifted Ellie and showed Sir Raynor how to hold a child in a more comfortable manner. She was not uncomfortable when Sir Raynor held her. Everyone was amazed at such a response from his Grace. His Grace asked if she agreed with him or not as well. She couldn't just admit it there as she was feeling shy. He noticed her bow. She told him that it was given to her by Lord Amanta. It was much better than any other bow she had used before. His Grace asked France about the bow he wanted to gift Ellie. France didn't have any answer regarding that. She understood that earlier when France brought something for her, it was the bow he wanted to gift her. She told him that the bow she got from his Grace was the best of all. His Grace was happy that she liked it. She appreciated his taste but got upset that she was being called a child. However, France was happy that Miss Ellie had actually saved him. She didn't want to get more emotional, but for her own good, she wanted to be by his Grace's side. His Grace expressed concern regarding her diet as she looked skinny to him. She didn't understand how he felt that way as she was gaining more weight. His Grace rushed her to the dining table, thinking she would remain skinny if she kept skipping meals. Everyone standing there was shocked. He fed her while still holding her in his arms. He thought maybe she was not able to finish her meals, and that's why she was skinny. But Ellie had eaten a lot. He asked where she wanted to go next. She was surprised that he would take her there. He taunted her, saying that she thought he was her professional coachman. She didn't understand how his words didn't match his actions since he was the one who asked her where she wanted to go. She told him to take her to Damien's training room where the knights were sparring. His Grace thought she wanted to learn about swords since she was able to shoot arrows. The training was intense, which was hard for Ellie. He didn't understand why she had brought him there. Damien called for Ellie then. She got off his arms and rushed towards Damien, saying she had promised to watch him during his training. Damien was happy to see her there. She asked him if he had eaten anything. He wanted to finish his training so he could eat with Ellie, but she had already eaten before she came there. He asked with whom. It was His Grace with whom she had lunch. His Grace was standing there with folded hands. He noticed Aura. He saw Damien with rage in his eyes. Damien looked at him like a cat about to attack. He was just a smiling child in front of Duke Shiwitz. Even if Duke Shiwitz helped him, he would still feel envy towards Duke Shiwitz. He wanted Ellie to eat with him since he had trained hard. Ellie consoled him, saying they would eat together. Duke Shiwitz said who would sit and eat with him, so he suggested they all eat together. This was a good chance for Damien to get closer to Duke Shiwitz. But Damien seemed off, though he agreed as Ellie wanted to eat with him, so he would as well. His Grace found Damien's reaction cute, and Ellie was about to eat lunch again with Damien. But instead, they would eat dinner together rather than lunch. It was a delicious dinner. Damien offered some food, as did His Grace, for Ellie. Ellie did not like it as they both were approaching her to eat something. They asked how she liked it. It was her 10th plate, and she was holding food in her mouth. Ellie wanted them both to eat as well. Ellie and Lady Amanta were sitting for tea. Ellie explained to her what had happened with Damien and His Grace. Lady Amanta understood that she was receiving lots of love from both of them. Ellie thought it was not love, but His Grace was enjoying teasing her. Lady Amanta smiled at her words. Ellie was concerned about her weight because she had eaten too much the previous night due to His Grace and Damien. Lady Amanta didn't find her that chubby. Suddenly, Lady Amanta started coughing. Ellie got worried and asked if she needed help. Lady Amanta assured her it was just a tickle and asked Ellie if she could go inside. She was fine. Nothing serious had happened. She just wanted to be in her room to feel better. Ellie did a great job, and Lady Amanta advised her to give a gift to His Grace. Ellie was worried that His Grace might not like her gift. She remembered how last time she gave him a gift, he didn't seem to react much. Lady Amanta told her that His Grace was not good at expressing his emotions to people. She suggested that Ellie should give him something that she had made herself. He would surely appreciate it. Ellie agreed that she would make something, and Lady Amanta offered her help. Ellie was unsure if it was a good idea to give him something. Her face turned pale. His Grace noticed her standing there beside them. Auntie arrived and greeted her good day. Ellie quickly hid the gift she had brought for His Grace. Auntie informed her that they were going for a patrol around the duchy, so they would not be in the castle for a few days. The Black Lions would go with Duke Shiwitz. Auntie advised her not to cause any trouble for the others. Ellie agreed that she would behave, especially since Lady Amanta and Sir Jarrett would also be there with her. His Grace noticed that she had grown close to the others. Auntie noticed something about His Grace. Ellie acted as if Sir Jarrett was her guardian now, which was natural considering the Amanta family was about to adopt Ellie. His Grace remembered about the adoption. A man arrived and asked His Grace if they should leave now for the patrol. Ellie was about to lose her chance to give the gift to Shiwitz. Hastily, she called to His Grace and said, "Here, take this gift from me." It was a knotted tassel she had made with Lady Amanta's help. His Grace couldn't believe that she had made it. She explained that she made it to keep him safe. She felt a bit embarrassed and quickly added that if he didn't want to take it with him, he could just leave it there. His Grace took her gift and hung it on his body armor. He told her that he would keep it to tease her for the rest of her life. She was stunned that he called her work shabby. He patted her head and said it was actually very nice. It was just a joke. His Grace really liked her gift. He and his associates left for the patrol around the duchy. She was relieved that he praised her for something she had made for him. A few days passed, and Ellie was holding a sword. It was the latest creation by Lord Amanta's son. She wanted Damien to hold the sword as well, so she asked Sir Jarrett if Damien could try it too. Damien held the sword in his hand. It was a pretty good sword, not too heavy or too big for him. Damien started swinging the sword around, and it was lighter than he expected. Ellie was happy that he liked it. By that time, Talum and Waybrock arrived as well. They were curious as Ellie was there to see the newly crafted sword. Waybrock looked much healthier than before. Talum asked her who the boy standing next to her was. She introduced Damien to both Talum and Waybrock. She also introduced Talum to Damien, explaining that Talum was helping Waybrock with his words. Damien still had issues with other people, but Talum found Damien cute and nice. Talum wondered how old Damien was, so Ellie replied that he was about to turn 12 years old. Talum smiled to himself about something. Ellie then asked them both if they would come with her, as Lord Amanta had given permission to Sir Jarrett for market visits and market analysis. Talum had to decline the offer as his master needed his help to forge another sword. Talum and his master were working on another sword. She didn't understand what they were making. Talum leaned towards Damien and smiled. Damien didn't understand why he smiled. Ellie and Damien went to the market. They were eating something. She didn't understand why Talum was acting a bit strange. Maybe he was inspired by Damien's eyes, which were like blue gems. As they were in the market, she decided to focus on finding new ideas and exploring places she hadn't been able to explore last time. She felt something, turned around, and felt like someone was watching her. She thought maybe it was a band of thieves, but they shouldn't be here anymore since Sir Raynor had captured their entire gang. She held Damien's hand tightly and went to find Sir Jarrett, just in case, or to return to the carriage. She smelled something strange, something rotten. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand, and Damien and Ellie were forcibly separated. Ellie called for Damien, and Damien called for Ellie. Meanwhile, in the battlefield, His Grace and his associates were fighting. The priest was unable to purify one of them. They were able to move at that rate because Baron Amanta had taken care of the encampment. Auntie noticed that His Grace was smiling. He was touching the gift Ellie had given him. He asked Auntie what it meant to be family. Auntie didn't understand what he was talking about, and while speaking, he also talked to His Grace. Even Auntie had the answer to the question His Grace asked him. Since he didn't have any answer, he thought parents would do anything for their child and the child would develop trust and grow more. He understood what Auntie meant. Meanwhile, the other night fighting said to think about Baron Amanta, his wife, and Sir Jarrett. They considered Ellie as their own, and that's what a family is. He understood that the Baron considered her a daughter. Auntie got scared. The knight apologized for a slip of the tongue. He said the Baron was not young, so he saw her as a granddaughter, not a daughter. Auntie and the other knight were shocked when the Duke said why people didn't consider him as well, as he would do anything for them too. He wanted to finish the work and wanted to go back quickly. Once they returned, His Grace would ask about the things they learned. Michelle came there and helped Miss Ellie from that man's hands. She inspected if Ellie was okay or not. Ellie was surprised but fine after all. The other maid was holding the guy on the ground. Damien was worried about Ellie too, but she was fine and smiling. As she raised her hands, there was blood on them. Damien was scared. Michelle said that once Sir Jarrett arrived there, she would hand him over to Sir Jarrett and he would face the consequences when His Grace arrived. She also noticed some smell there. The man apologized, saying he was worried about his daughter running away just like his wife did. When his daughter left home, his wife told him that his daughter had blonde hair and green eyes. They all noticed that the man was telling the truth. He did have blonde hair and green eyes, just like Ellie. Sir Jarrett arrived there and asked what happened. Ellie was thinking maybe she was the daughter of that man. Her mother never talked about her father. She always thought her father would be just like her, a homeless man wandering around the streets. But if he was really her father, why didn't he come earlier for her? It was Sister Ovely who arrived there, and His Grace too. His Grace noticed Ellie over there and asked her what she was doing with that man. She wanted to ask the same to His Grace. Sister came there and said she could explain if Ellie wanted. Sister introduced herself and introduced Ellie to her. She told Ellie that she lives on a street and cures pain. The man who held her hand also belonged to such pain. The man started running away suddenly, saying he had found his daughter. Sister and His Grace followed him just in case to catch him. Sir Jarrett didn't understand how that justified his actions. There was no proof that Ellie was his daughter. Even though there was no evidence of him being her father, he was just trying to find his child. Damien was angry and told Sister that what made her the judge to decide what was right and wrong. Only Ellie had the right to decide because she was the one who got hurt. Damien looked furious at Sister. The sister got worried. Damien had mistaken her. She was the priest Damien had asked. She should be more concerned about the person who got hurt. He was protecting her and she liked it. He had changed a lot ever since that day. Thanks to Damien, she was not shaken there. She should think carefully about the situation that occurred there. There was no evidence that the man was her father, so all she could do was believe in her feelings. Damien was worried about Ellie. Sister apologized to Ellie for not going for her at first. Sister Ovely saw her wounds and started treating them. Sister Ovely was able to heal with the power of the divine. She used holy water to heal Ellie. But according to Ellie, every priest used to heal nobles. So why didn't she? Damien questioned if the water was holy or not. The bottle got dropped, and he noticed that the rotten smell was coming from her. Sister Ovely was mad at Damien because of his claims. She was thinking what he was implying about her. How dare he make that claim without knowing anything? She recognized that his eyes were familiar. She had seen them before as well. She remembered back in time when she went to buy a potion for her eyes and hair. She saw him trapped in a cage. At that time, she didn't recognize him. He was a test subject from the apothecary. She clearly had no idea he was the son of Duke Clyder. She could have helped him at that time, but instead, she ignored him and left. She understood how he knew that it wasn't holy water, but he wouldn't be able to prove it. Damien pointed out some mistakes in how it wouldn't be holy water. There was no way she would let Damien ruin her day. His Grace stepped in. He was not pleased with the tone Damien used to speak to the priest. According to him, priests like them help orphans. But Damien hadn't said anything wrong. He spoke the truth. Ellie had enough of them arguing with each other. Damien just stopped speaking. He was sad, and so was Ellie, because Ellie knew Damien would not make any claims without reason. But she was also a priest from the temple, and the temple and the emperor were close allies. But if that wasn't holy water, then what was in the broken bottle, and why did she give it to her? The man apologized, saying it was all his fault. He was so sure that it was his daughter standing there. Ashel got angry because of his reckless claims over her. She asked what his wife's name was or where the last time he met his wife. The man had no idea how he met his wife or where, as he always lived on the road, so he didn't know her real name either. Ellie knew that people who live on the road change their names multiple times. Also, her mother was a fugitive, so it was common for her mother to change her name according to the situation. The description from that man matched her mother, but still, something was missing. Now that man had no clue if he was her father. Ashel advised her to go home and not give more attention to this man's delusions. She was worried about Ellie as well. Sister Ovely said that children and their parents are brought to the world through God's will. As she was God's representative, she was ready to confirm their relationship with the help of holy water. Sir Jarrett didn't understand how that was even possible, as every human is born with mana, and mana is connected to bloodlines. So if they dropped a blood drop into holy water, they'd be able to measure mana. Ellie did not have any extra holy water at that time, so she had to ask the temple for the holy water. Damien didn't seem happy with Sister Ovely. Sister Ovely asked Ellie whether she wanted to find her family or not before beginning the ritual. Once they finished, they would be able to understand whether the man was her father or not. Sister Ovely hoped Ellie didn't want to find her parents because she might not want to leave the noble family. She thought maybe Ellie avoided the question and appeared like a heartless person. She played a trick with her, saying that maybe Duke also wanted to find her family as well. She played this trick so that Ellie couldn't resist the offer Sister offered her. Ellie understood her trick, as nobody there knew Ellie belonged to the noble family. So how did the priest know she was living with Duke's family? The priest must have had some kind of motive regarding that. That was the reason she approached her. Ellie didn't understand how she knew she was living with Duke's family. She came there actually took Sir Jarrett's carriage, neither the noble family's carriage. Duke Schuetz and the temple did not have a good relationship, as the temple used to meddle in House Schuetz's family affairs. And all of a sudden, a child wanted to help another child find her parents who was under Duke's protection. She talked about his Grace's illness to her. She didn't know why, but maybe because the priest stopped visiting him. She asked if it was possible for her to give her some holy water so that she could treat Duke's illness. She requested her. Sister Ovely was stunned. She wanted to repay Duke Schuetz, but she didn't know how to, so she asked for holy water. Sister was annoyed that she was about to make her and the man undergo a paternity test, but she somehow managed to turn the tables. With a hopeless face, she asked if it was too hard a request. She said to her. Ashel was stunned too. Everyone felt bad for Miss Ellie. She smiled that she was able to dodge her test and turn the tables in her favor. It was night and dark. Ellie had to keep a bandage on her wrist. A doctor was there for Ellie. The pain was not that much as she had gotten used to it. She was glad how everything had worked out for her. Sister Ovely said she would bring the holy water after a few days. But His Grace was not happy with Sister's treatment. He didn't like how Damien had talked to her. She wanted to talk with His Grace and resolve the issues as soon as possible. The maids were feeling guilty and were ready to be punished by Ellie. It was just an action they had done, nothing was wrong. She started waving her hand to show that she was doing great. Roina was concerned about her health because she was injured. She insisted that no matter how much she was hurt, Ellie should always tell her. Her maids were really depressed by the incidents that happened that day. They were really worried about her, like Baroness Amanta. Ellie felt like if she was the daughter of a thief, she was just a temporary replacement of the lead female. She would be gone sooner, but she would miss all those who cared about her. She just didn't want to get emotional at that time. She told Roina about what had happened that day. Roina was shocked to hear she didn't believe the father thing. She said she had no idea if he was her father, and the priest would come back in 4 days to confirm and take a test. Roina didn't understand what they should do. Roina knew that something like this would happen when both Baron and his grace were away. Also, she did not have any legal guardianship yet, so she could not resist her approach as well. Roina wrote a letter to his grace and advised Ellie not to worry about this anymore. Ellie was relieved that Roina was there to help her. Even Roina was pleased as well. Roina took everyone outside as Ellie needed some rest. Roina wanted Ellie to take complete rest and not be disturbed. Ellie asked Damien if he was tired and suggested they could go to bed. But Damien was not tired. He was concerned. He was still thinking about what had happened earlier. She consoled him not to be scared and assured him that those kinds of things wouldn't happen again. But Damien was feeling guilty. He thought it was his fault that she got injured because he had loosened her hand. She didn't feel good either because it was not his fault after all. Seeing him feel guilty made Ellie sad as well. Damien couldn't have done anything to prevent what had happened earlier. She imagined the situation where he got hurt, and if she felt sorry about that, how would he feel then? Damien got scared again. He understood that it was not his fault. She didn't want him to blame himself. That would upset his grace as well. But him being sad made Ellie even sadder. Everything that had happened was not his fault. He should not blame himself for anything. But interestingly, none of these things actually happened in the original story. As Ellie was there, that was the reason how things had been going around. She had to fix everything. To make Damien happy, she said she might want to eat hot cocoa. She asked him if he could sneak out and bring her a cup of cocoa because since she had been having sweets a lot, they wouldn't let her have cocoa. Damien ran from there to bring cocoa for Ellie. Ellie was concerned about the young priest. The priest knew who she was. Ellie was wondering if they knew about her mom as well. She wrote something on the paper, but if the young priest knew about her, then the emperor would have known about it, and he wouldn't be silent. Since nothing had happened, it was easy to understand that the emperor did not know about her. She wanted to know how much the temple knew about her, so she tried a trick to get some information. She stamped the envelope, but there was no way that she could send that envelope with a noble tag on it. Damien arrived there by then with cocoa. No servant saw him coming there with cocoa. She appreciated his efforts for her. She enjoyed the hot cocoa. Damien liked that Ellie was happy with the cocoa. Ellie gave some cocoa to Damien as well. A carriage arrived. The priest was at the palace for the first time ever since she left for the temple. She was determined to get the palace back to her. Let's see that in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.